I got on this 90-foot pole that was leaning on the last gaff. I have these little blades on my gaffs that I wear to gaffs out, and I almost fall, and I'm holding on to the span wire up 90 feet. I'm hanging up there and thinking, oh my God, I almost just died. It hit me in that moment. I don't want to do this. I think I should have been an artist. I love art. From that moment, I just knew I didn't want to do it. I always have a sketchbook. I'm always painting. Whenever I'm having dinner with friends, I'm always drawing on my napkins. At 25, I decided, yeah, I'm going to give it a shot and see if I can get into ArtCenter Pasadena. I got in on a really good scholarship. I submitted a portfolio to DreamWorks, and I don't know how and I don't know why, but my portfolio got me into that studio. Years later, I'd become an art director and a production designer, and I would be the person looking at those portfolios. There'd be no way I would have chosen my portfolio.
Hey everybody, so in this episode, I'm joined by Mike Hernandez. He is a former DreamWorks concept designer, illustrator, and current art instructor. In this episode, we're talking a little bit about how he found his path as an artist. I really admire Mike. Nowadays, he's primarily teaching and mentoring people on how to become a professional artist. I really enjoyed my conversation with him, and I think you will too. By the way, if you'd like to consider supporting me, please consider checking out my website. There are courses up there by people like Morgan Weisling, Rand Benjamin, and Michael Hampton, as well as at some point I will be posting some of my own stuff up there. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the episode. So I appreciate you doing this. Super kind of you.
Thank you for having me.
Well, so the way I usually start these things is the point of this is not to talk about technique or how to become an artist. You know, the sort of things that people normally talk about from like a student perspective. It's more about like the why of doing it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think in general, the thing about being an artist is like doing it for a long period of time and not being burnt out by it. Because the act of drawing and painting, I think, is actually relatively tedious, you know? And, you know, it's very easy to get distracted or to find interest doing other things. But to get to a point where you're like masterful or you're able to like, you know, express yourself on a deeper level other than just like the studies, it takes some amount of discipline and like pushing through stuff. And I guess I kind of wanted to get your like thoughts and feelings on like your career and what you feel like has made you do it for a long period of time.
Yeah, you know, it's a great question. And if I reflect back on childhood, I kind of remember my motivation was pure. You know, it was a very honest motivation. It wasn't driven by this is what I want to do as a career. It was more of an inspiration, right? I was inspired by my father. He worked in the aerospace industry. So yeah, he worked for Northrop, and he was one of their commercial artists there. And he was also heavily into traditional painting as well. So he was really great. So he had a home office. He had all the markers, airbrushes. He had everything. But he was traditionally trained. And growing up as a kid, my brother and I just kind of thought, yeah, that's just the way life is, right? You grow up and you become an artist and you become as good as our father is. Not knowing that he was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't know what it meant to be a phenomenal artist back then, nor what it would take to be an artist. I just saw my father and modeled him like, yeah, you just become that, and that's it. So my brother and I just kind of jumped right into doing it, but not thinking we're going to become an artist as a career, but we just loved painting. My dad did it. We loved doing what my dad does. My dad hiked. We wanted to go where my dad went. We went hiking. So we wanted to just kind of do what my father did. So we were just into it. We were totally into it. But we were also the people who were drawing on our desks at school. We were getting into trouble for, you know, always drawing on our desks, drawing on our peachy folders like everybody else used to do, right? Where they would ask you do book covers for all your books, and then we would sketch. We would love doing drawings all over that. So it was like the aesthetic of drawing was just for fun and for expression back then. There was no glory of, I'm going to become an artist someday. And I think because of that, it took the pressure away from the performance of being an artist, right? Yeah. And I noticed these things in, you know, teaching. I've been teaching for about 30 years now. And one of the things I've learned is the mindset of some of those very successful artists. There's different types of hunger, right? There's the hunger of an artist who's like, I want to get there someday, but I can enjoy the process along the way. I can enjoy the process of failure while I'm getting there. Whereas there's a lot of people who aren't really comfortable in that learning stage, and because they're trying to compare themselves to where they want to be, as opposed to the smallest steps, the little things that they're learning along the way. And as a kid, I was just excited to just pick up charcoal and paint and using my dad's markers. And it was fun. I never judged myself. I was never hard on myself or my artwork. And I noticed with some of my students, there's a mindset in there with those that are just so laid back about the learning. They're like, yeah, it's cool. And they have fun while they do it. And I noticed some of the other students, not all of them, but there's a lot of my students who have this mentality, like, I got to have it now. And I can see that it's being driven by the need to get a job, right?
Yeah.
One day I want to get that job. I want to get out there and what classes do I need to take? And what are the special ingredients to make the artwork that you're making? Not knowing that a lot of that stuff is driven by a lot of different experiences over the length of your lifetime, right? So for me, I think I just found it to be something that grounded me as a kid. Never thought I would do anything with it. I was always known for being the student in my classes who kind of had, like, anytime you're like, well, Mike had both either the messiest desk in school. He was the messiest desk, but he was also the most talented student. And I was like, okay, that's cool. But again, it wasn't like, great, because of that, I'm going to go be an artist one day. I think I might have had it in my mind at some point because I was raised Catholic. And I, at a very young age, was going to be, I was an altar boy at a very young age, younger than most other students who become altar boys in our school in the Archdiocese. I had it in my brain that I'm going to be a priest one day. And I just thought I was going to be a priest. That fizzled out later on when I found girls, right, in high school, and I started dating. I was like, no, I'm not going to be a priest. But again, I just going through these phases, I never had it in my mind that I was going to be an artist. I think it was going to be that. Maybe I might think about becoming an astronaut and all the fun things that kids think about. I think it wasn't until high school. I dropped out of high school. I didn't graduate on time. I dropped out at my junior year because I wanted to have too much fun. I was normally a pretty disciplined kid growing up, very studious, but I was also very nerdy growing up when I was younger. And then when I got into high school, I started hanging around with friends who weren't so nerdy, who cleaned me up a bit. And all of a sudden, I started noticing girls. Some girls were starting to notice me. And before you knew it, I became distracted. And then I became a big DJ. And again, this all kind of lines up with expression, being an artist, right? And as a DJ, music, experimenting, my mind was just all about I was either painting in my art classes. I was having so much fun. Again, not because I was going to become an artist someday, but it grounded me. It was always something that grounded me. I loved it. And it was my music. I was a DJ, but then I got carried away. And I dropped out of my junior year because I just wanted to party too hard. By the time 19 comes around, I realize I need to get my act together. I need to do something. I go back, I get my GED. Then I go to Pasadena City College. Pasadena City College, no art classes, right? Everything there was just about getting my AA, get back into shape, and decide what it is you want to do. Still didn't know what I wanted to do. I took a class on child psychology. I'm like, this is kind of interesting. Maybe I want to be a psychologist. So while I was doing that, I was thinking, I need a job. So I went to work for a cable company. And this cable company was down the street from my parents' house. It was, I think back in the days, it was Comcast. And I became a pole climber because at the time I was also into the outdoors. Mountain climbing, rock climbing. And again, this leads into what I do now, right? I was just not knowing that all of these things were foreshadowing what I would become these days. But I had spent so much time outdoors, in the Sierra Club, mountaineering, rock climbing, up on the walls in Yosemite, did so much of that stuff. And so when I went to work for Comcast, there was a position open for cable auditing. And what that basically meant was you become a person who goes to see if services for people who no longer need cable have been terminated. Like, is their line still connected up there? Do I need to go up and terminate it and put a little cap on it so people can't get it illegally anymore? The other thing we would do is check to see if someone was illegally getting cable. So I would either climb poles, or I would open J boxes, or I would be going underneath people's houses. So I was doing that. But while I was doing that, I always had a sketchbook on me because I just loved sketching, drawing, not a lot of painting, just sketching and drawing. And then did that for about 3 years. And then I started thinking, this could be my career. And this is about at 25 years old. Like, this may be my career. And at the time I was about to get married, I was going up this foam pole because they knew that I was the crazy guy that liked to climb the scary, crazy foam poles that you probably shouldn't climb. You should get a bucket truck. So it's like, let's call Mike. Mike will do it. Let's get Mikey. Mikey will do it. Yeah. They used to call me Mikey. So I'd go down there and I would climb the pole, and I got on this 90-foot pole that was leaning, but the pole was like cinnamon stick. It was just, I didn't know it was that bad. So I get up 90 feet up there, and then on the last gaff, I have these little blades on these gaffs that I wear to gaff up the pole. Gaffs out, and I almost fall, and I'm holding on to the span wire up 90 feet, falling, who probably wouldn't have made it, right? Or I would have been just crippled. Loop my feet around, and I get my belt harness, and I clip myself in, and just, I'm hanging up there, just hanging and thinking, oh my God, I almost just died. And then it hit me in that moment, which was really weird. Like, I don't want to do this. I think I should have been an artist. I love art. It didn't all come to me in that moment, but there was like these flashes, like from that moment, I just knew I didn't want to do it. Yeah. And then after coming down from the pole, the days after that, it just really sunk in because it was scary. It was traumatic that I almost fell. And then I just started thinking, I don't really want to do that. And I think I do want to be an artist. I think I do, but it wasn't this big drive. But I was like, I think I'd rather do that. Because I think I'm good at it. I always have a sketchbook. I'm always painting. Whenever I'm having, dinner with friends, I'm always drawing on my napkins. I'm doing this all the time. I love being out in nature. I love everything about it. And it was at 25, I decided, I'm going to give it a shot and see if I can get into ArtCenter Pasadena. And I got in on a really good scholarship. And it was at that point when I'm thinking, I still wasn't thinking, I'm going to make it as a big artist. It was just like, I'm going to give this a shot and see what happens. And I never thought I was going to be an entertainment artist either. So when I get to ArtCenter, it was just the foundation when I got there. Traditional art, traditional painting. I did head painting, head drawing, figurative art. And I was pretty good at that. I kind of felt like, okay, I found my voice. I love figurative art. I love figure drawing, figure painting, head painting. I was good at all those things. And I excelled there. And by the time I graduated, it's like I found my voice. Like, I'm really good at what I'm doing here in this art world. I graduated with distinction from college. And I thought, what do I want to do with this now? Like, now I graduated. I have debt, college debt. What do I want to do with this? Why do I want to do it? Right. And I knew it wasn't for survival. However, I was like, I need to get my debt paid for. So I had friends who were working in the animation field. And they said, hey, why not submit a portfolio? And I submitted a portfolio to DreamWorks. And I don't know how and I don't know why, but my portfolio got me into that studio. Years later, now that later on, I'd become an art director and a production designer, and I would be the person looking at those portfolios. There'd be no way I would have chosen my portfolio to get into that studio. And I think it was because the wrong people were looking at my portfolio. Thank goodness. It was the producers and the directors who were looking at that portfolio. And I guess they liked my charcoal drawings, my head drawings. There was nothing wrong with what I was doing. It just didn't have the things that I would look for as a production designer. It's not experienced enough, right? Yeah. I'm looking for like, well, where is his cinematic storytelling? Where's the theatrical work? His sense of composition and layout, all the things, right? Prop design. I need all those ingredients. I didn't have any of that in my portfolio. Yeah. It was all traditional work. And so these directors and producers are like, yeah, I'd like to hang his stuff on my wall. Let's get him in here. They just went off that. And I didn't know why I was being kind of like scorned by a lot of these big, like these, I didn't know who I was with, by the way. I was with these big shots, these big shot painters. And I didn't know just how big they were. These were people who were in the industry since the early years of Disney. And, they'd worked 9 to 20 years to get to that position of visual development. And here I am, plopped into their position to be a visual development artist. So that's a whole other story. And I barely survived being put in that position. But many years later, I'd become an art director and a production designer, and I would make it in that industry. So I kind of looking back at how I got to that position was interesting, because it wasn't a drive. My drive wasn't because I wanted to do it as a career.
Yeah.
My drive was pure. I was always drawing. I was always sketching. I was always painting. I was inspired by my father. I loved doing it. Right. And I've even put myself in a position right now that's even more difficult. Like, I think it would have been easier and better for me to have stayed as a full-time production designer, making more money in the entertainment industry, doing what I was doing. But I chose to kind of go more towards freelance and fine art right now, which is even harder, and I'm not making anywhere near as much money. But it's because I'm doing it for the purest reasons possible. Like, what is it that I truly, purely love, right? I do love doing what I was doing for entertainment. I love entertainment art. I love production art. I love doing it. I love being able to kind of straddle both worlds, having one hand in entertainment and doing some work for animation, and then also balancing that with some of the fine art world or the contemporary world, some of the plein-air world, outdoor painting, teaching workshops. So yeah, I guess in its essence, it grounds me till this day, as it does what it did when I was a kid. It grounds me.
Well, and I feel like often when people ask, like, how do I get a job in the industry, they're asking how to get a job. But honestly, it's like the little things compound, and that's what, it's like having a voice, having real human experience. That's what really matters, And when speaking of someone's career, the validation of being approved at some studio or getting into some school isn't the thing that's memorable. It's the friendships and the art and the experiences you had along the way.
Right.
And I think people in general, when they ask those questions, they're looking for like a linear path to being successful. And everyone I've talked to up on this podcast, it's never been linear. Like, sure, somebody might go to art school, but then they deviate and they go become a plumber for 10 years, or they go do something else, or they're not doing exactly what they want. They're just trying to pay the bills. And, it's not exactly what you would expect or hope for to hear if you're like people want the only answer to be like, oh, you take these classes and then you're ready to go and work at some job. But it's way more complicated than that, and nuanced, and way more personal than anything that can ever be laid out in front of somebody.
It is experience, right? Life experience brings people to those positions. And if I think back at some of the better artists who've ever worked at the studio with me, some of the bigger names that I've come to respect the most, their journeys were interesting. I remember, one of the people I tend to speak about the most, and I'm very fond of, his name is Marcos Mateo, and he's a production designer now. But back when I got into DreamWorks, I think he was what you would, in the layout department, he's what's referred to back then, when they had it, as a workbook artist. They did all the camera workbook, and he was just so phenomenal. I remember getting his workbook before I did layouts to kind of see all the camera work and his beautiful sketches and line arts. I'm like, oh God, this guy's phenomenal. People praised him. And then one day he just kind of up and left the studio, and he was just like, no, I want to move back to, like, I think Spain or something like that, with his family. And he was so good that even Jeffrey Katzenberg, went into his office and just begged.
What are you doing? Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Please stay. Yeah. Please stay. Yeah. And he was just like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. And he left, and he went off to do his own thing. I don't know if he was still teaching from there, but I think he was living in I don't know where he was living, but I think he was living in a beachside place somewhere in Spain or Portugal, or I don't know where it was. Forgive me, Marcos, I don't remember where you went, but he was gone for many, many years, And then when he came back into the studio again, and he was a concept artist, a layout artist, and he was even stronger. You would think that if a person left the studio for that long, they lose relevance, right? Like, I always fear that sometimes, like, if I'm away from the studio for too long, do I lose being relevant in this field? You worry about that, especially if you're going off in a completely different direction that has nothing to do with that field anymore. And Marcos wasn't doing any, at least I don't think he was. Again, Marcos, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I don't think he was doing entertainment work when he left. I think he might have had a school where he was teaching art up there, but he wasn't doing entertainment work. Many, many years later, he came back and he just jumped right back in. It's as if he's never left. In fact, he just continued to excel and get even better and better and better. And one of the bigger names in the industry right now. So it was really interesting to see how, taking life experience elsewhere and coming back to it. I've seen a lot of artists do that. They took some time off, and they'll usually do that after they've gone through a show, like a big show that's kind of heavy hitting, right? They'll take some time off, and then they'll come back and they'll be a little bit stronger than ever, as opposed to, the people who tend to stick into it too long and they don't take any breaks. I think there's a tendency to get burned out too soon,
definitely
too early.
Yeah. Well, and I think with all this stuff, it's like, it's almost having like a faith that no matter what you do, there's going to be some audience for whatever thing that you're making, if you're doing a good enough job. And I feel like, honestly, that the thing that I'm only really trying to cultivate is just that confidence to keep going. Like, assuming that if I put out more podcasts, people are going to watch them, and trying to quell that self-doubt or that fear that, like, oh, I'm a fraud, or, the next thing I do, no one's going to like. And then after that, everything I do is going to be horrible, And I think in general, when I talk to people, that's like the big enemy. It's not if someone is better than you. It's not the amount of money you make. It's not, any of that stuff. It's that belief that no matter what you do, you can't make something that people will be able to care about. And I think it's deeply related to, I guess, just like the state of the industry. Like if someone isn't able to get a job in animation or games or movies or something, that doesn't necessarily mean what they're doing is not worthwhile or not valuable. It just might not be marketable in the moment right now. And or won't be marketable. I don't know if that fits into the equation of whether or not it's worth doing at all,
That's a hard one to navigate for an artist, right? Because you're always trying to make split decisions based on those things. You tend to make your decisions in life based on current and past performance. Like, past performance tells me X, Y, and Z. Current performance tells me if I'm not getting a job right now, I'm doing something wrong and they don't like it.
Well, the other thing is, like, your parents might be telling you you're doing the wrong thing, or society might be like, you can be an engineer, or like something I talk about a lot is like, everyone should theoretically be a doctor or an engineer because it's a more practical, useful job. It's more tangibly useful. I don't think that's actually true, but in moments of weakness, it's like, I wouldn't necessarily recommend someone I know become an artist because it's so difficult or it's not tangible, in the way that you can make progress. And, but obviously people are artists and they are able to make it work. And to me, it's like not logical. And I think almost like listening to that more logical side of trying to make this stuff work, it doesn't make sense. Like, maybe if you stayed working at Comcast, you would be a lot more secure financially. Maybe you could have become a manager for that area.
Very true.
Yeah, and it's like, that would have been the correct decision to do from a certain perspective, but it would have been the wrong decision for your soul, not to sound too corny or anything.
No, you hit on such a huge point. It's big right now with me because there's a lot of things I didn't do in my career to really set myself up in a way that my other friends who made different career choices. Yeah. I have friends who have already retired now, and they've got their big, beautiful homes and RVs, and they're set. They're done, right? Yeah. I got a friend who's going to be retiring really, really soon, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't think I'm anywhere near ready to retire. If I wanted to, like, I don't want to, but if I wanted to, I wouldn't be able to retire right now. I'm not in that place right now because I don't think I wasn't wise enough in my choices to do that. However, you hit in a point because I'm like, I thought to myself, like, okay, several of my friends who have retired are now looking for something to do. Yeah. And one of them is taking painting.
Right.
He's trying to learn how to paint. He's like, I can only golf so much and I can only drink so much wine at my age. He's like, I want to do something, right? And I think about what I'm doing now, and I'm like, well, I'm kind of doing the things I think I would do if I would retired.
Yeah.
Maybe at a more accelerated rate. Like I'm teaching a lot of classes. I wouldn't be teaching this much, but not to say I don't love teaching. I love it, but I got to do a lot of it, to stay relevant and make sure that I can, be financially stable with it. But, yeah, it's interesting. That also comes back to looking at portfolios when I was in the industry too. We tend to love looking at the portfolios from students who weren't driven by the industry, right? Industry tends to kind of push people in a direction. And what we kind of read from portfolios is this insecurity, right? And I get it. I totally get it. But in that insecurity in those portfolios, what we tend to read sometimes is, are we doing the right thing? That's what as I turn pages and I look at art, it's like, does this look like things that you're seeing on the screen? Does this look like visual development? Does this look like that movie? Does this look like it's a page right out of the art of this movie or the art of that movie book? And it just kind of has all of that. Like, am I getting that? And what I'm not getting from them is, this is me.
Yeah.
Right.
This is you me. Specifically. Yeah.
This is me. And those are the people that really excelled at looking for, like, sometimes we wouldn't always hire those. Sometimes we're just going to look for the people who are like, am I getting it? And be like, yeah, you're getting it. Get in, you're good. And then sometimes those people, when they got on the door, would explode and be amazing, right? All they needed was just to get their foot in the door. But sometimes we were really looking for that person who just like, they just like, this is me. Take it or leave it. It's like, take it or leave it. This is what I do. I love it. If for some reason you can find a place for me in this industry, that'd be great. If not, this is what I do. Yeah. And man, we love that. I'm not saying we're looking for people who are arrogant, but we're just looking for people who, like, if you just lock them in a garage for a year, with some paint and pencils and whatnot, would they create a movie? What would they do? What would they do just because? Not because they're trying to get a job, but just because they had nothing else to do. Well, I'm just going to create a movie. I'm going to create art. I'm going to create some storytelling, not to satisfy you, not to get me a job. And not because the current trends of the industry are telling me to go that.
I interviewed Richard Taylor, the guy who founded Weta Workshop, last year at Comic-Con. And he was talking about how when he's looking at a portfolio, he'll just flip to the back immediately because he wants to see what people did on their own. Because it's like when you're doing something in the context of a class, you're following someone else's formula for creativity. Anyone can, go and copy someone else's thing on how to make some landscape thing or some piece of environment design. But like he was saying, even if it's bad work, you'd rather see them do bad work that's unique to them versus great work that is done within the confines of a classroom. And I think on a deeper level, like I think the market itself responds to unique projects and unique things. Like, like when you look at DreamWorks projects, like I love DreamWorks projects, but it's like pitching Shrek on its own is it's like an odd thing that you would expect to become like one of the biggest animated movies of all time, like to the average person, it's like, oh, this ogre in a swamp. That's not like, Cinderella. That's not like a generic thing you'd expect to be successful, but it was deeply empathetic and deeply relatable to everyone watching it, and, it's like maybe if you were to go back to when Shrek was being released and there was another movie coming out that was like more marketable, you would generally guess or bet money that the one that was more marketable would do better. But I guarantee there's probably some movie that was coming that was more marketable that did worse than Shrek because, it was just not, it didn't hit that chord in that same way.
Yeah, it's so funny not knowing what will and won't work when we're working in the industry. Sometimes we're completely oblivious as to what's going to happen. Like, I remember when we were working in the studio and we were just looking at some of the, not the art of, but some of the renders that were coming from Shrek. And this was at our PDI studio, so we had nothing to do with it. This was being done over at our Pacific Data Imaging when we had our second company, because the original Glendale campus didn't do 3D. We were all 2D from Prince of Egypt and Spirit. While those are being made, we had PDI up in San Francisco. They were doing Shrek. And so we would get images back on what these guys were working on. We're like, yeah, this is really weird. I wonder if this is going to be
odd.
Good.
Yeah,
it's odd. This guy in a swamp farts in the mud and he's with a princess. What the hell is going on?
The princess is also an ogre, and
The princess turns into ogre. Yeah. And so we're like, I guess anything goes, right? But even after we got a first screening of it, we didn't know, like, we were like, we like it, but what is the audience going to think about it, right? You know, we've had these experiences where we watched our own movies, and it turns out that not the general audience didn't seem to favor it the way we did. And so we were always really curious as to, well, how's the general audience going to feel compared to us, you know, because we're biased. We've put so much work, and sometimes we're amazed by just, you know, hey, my friends worked on this. Look what they did. Bravo. Right. But, yeah, the story, like, and then the funny thing about what made Shrek, well, obviously what made Shrek so good was its story. Story, any movie we've ever done, I don't care what it looks like. Story drives everything in the studio. I'm sorry. But the second part of that, of what made Shrek just so darn successful, was our limitations back then. You know, we didn't have the type of expensive rigging that we have now, right? And character rigging to make characters like, so if you remember, if you watch Shrek 1, and if you look at the rigging in his face and his expressions and the movement and the joints in his arms and his legs and the way all the characters were walking, the original rigging in there was just simple tubes, right? And if you watch Shrek walk in the very first one, he's just like, it looks silly, right? And their rigging was very silly. And then as we went to, I art directed on Shrek 4. So I know that by the time we got to Shrek 4, which I thought was really, really good, they made all of these big, amazing, but I kind of feel like in some ways unnecessary leaps, because I think there was this tendency with the studio to think we needed to give the audience more, right? It needs to look more, better, better, better. And so they made Shrek look so much more realistic. His rigging, his texture, when he walked, they were more realistic, right? All of that stuff improved. The finger rigging, everything, the rigging just got better and better and better and better. And I think in some movies, I think that works great, in some animated films. But for Shrek, I don't know. I'm one of those people who thought Shrek won because the rigging was so limited. It created a fun, like, Mad Magazine looking style, you know, to the look of their animation, which I kind of thought was really, really great.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's often those limitations that make the thing interesting, and it's things that are completely out of your control. Like, I think the surprising thing about being an artist is how little of it is in your own control for how marketable. You know, you just kind of make something and you hope it's good and you hope people like it, and then you move on to the next thing. And like the thing that I've been mentioning for this podcast is like, I mean, I guess I have nice cameras and microphones now, but like there's always a version of this that could have been like better and more convenient for me. Like if I had a super legit studio, you know, and a producer and like way more other things to make it better, you know, it might take away from the overall like vibe of, like, I had to drive 3.5, 4 hours to get up here, you know, and it's like,
I thank you for that.
Well, no, but it's like that adds to the, like, it's better than doing it over Zoom, you know, where it's like, it also adds like a layer of commitment or some other story. It's not exactly comfortable, you know? And I guess the reason I'm saying that is like, it is the way it is. And it's almost like there are other things happening that are making it interesting to people other than just having the best possible studio. And I feel like part of the appeal for students asking about like, how do I get a job? How do I learn how to paint? Is they're looking for like a linear way to make something marketable, you know, or a linear way to get themselves have that job. When in reality, I think instead of preparing more, instead of taking more classes, instead of like, you know, trying to be ready, people should just try and start making things, you know?
They need to be as good as they can be. And again, I think they're trying to outperform themselves is the mistake I see people making out there in the field. Is they're like, okay, I need to be better than next year's version of myself. I have to outdo that because the studio just keeps changing and changing, right? Yeah. And they're trying to keep up with the relevance. And I don't think it's about that at all. Like I said, when I was looking at portfolios, when I was a production designer or art director, I was looking for, unique. I was looking for honest, unique, like somebody who's got the chops, right? We always kind of use that term, like, does this guy or this girl, do they have the chops? Like, does it look like they are enjoying themselves artistically and they are good at what they're doing? Because if they do it, and if you put them in this environment, they're just going to flourish, right? We knew that sometimes it was a matter of just planting the right seed in the environment. Because let me tell you, there have been people in this industry, like, who are superstars that some other people just might not want to work with, right? Because there's egos to get through and whatnot, versus other people who might not have been quite as celebrity based in their abilities, but they were good, right? They were really good, but they were also very likable, right? There's something to be said about you, the person, and this is something I'm trying to teach my son, and he's going into his career choices. I said, and he was like, Dad, I'm worried about doing this, and what I have to do to this, and I gotta get this. I'm like, son, yes, we're going to work on all those things, and you're going to have to figure all that stuff out for sure. You're going to need to work on that, but do not forget at your core to be who you are right now, which is like the most honest, likable, good person. Yeah, that's an investment that people will always want to make in you. Like, okay, at the basics, does this guy have whatever it is we need? They will always choose you over the person who has even a little bit more experience, but isn't as likable or as honest at the base of who you are. And I've seen that. I've seen that in our industry. It's happened. I've seen some people sustain in the entertainment industry, in the field, the ones who are just much more honest, likable, and their work is good. They were able to do the work, and they were great. There's no such thing as anybody who stays there and isn't just good. They were all great, but there were just some people who were like these savant superstars. But there was something about some of those savant superstars that were kind of hard to work with sometimes. Ego kind of sometimes followed them, and they were always amazing, but sometimes you get that. So it was a weird correlation.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's like part of that is accepting yourself with all the warts and all the flaws and all the things that we have, all the perceived flaws that we have,
Yeah.
And like I have been watching Lord of the Rings, and I guess, talking about Shrek or anything, it's like, it's very easy to look at any popular piece of media from the past 40 years and find some wart on it, For Lord of the Rings, there's like, when I've talked about this a lot before on the podcast, but when Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli are meeting the writers of the Rohirrim for the first time, and Karl Urban's character gets on his horse, you see in the movie his sword fall out of the sheath, and they left it in, And it's like, you can still make a movie that gets tons of Oscars and all this stuff, and still have little mistakes like that, And I think sometimes people feel like if they have any flaws at all, or if they have any way, if there's any way of perceiving them as being less than, then it's like they're feeling like their status or their place in a company or whatever is at risk because someone can judge them for whatever reason.
No, for sure. Yeah, and that's something we sensed as well, and I've had to go through that in the industry. It's pretty cutthroat working in any big corporation, especially when it gets to, once you get too big for your bridges, right? The studio gets too big. I remember the studio in DreamWorks back in its heyday, before they were kind of Disney level, big monster studio. It was such a family driven studio, right? It has like that family feel to it. But at some point, once Jeffrey Katzenberg, had to sell and he had to leave, and it just kind of carried on to different names and different people, and it went under the umbrella of Universal. It's still an amazing company, right? It's still a great company. But then I think something happens when it becomes so big. Some of the things that get disconnected as it just expands is those little bonds in there of family connection just kind of might get lost.
Yeah.
I know that when I was working there, I always knew that I was covered by people who were always looking out for me. In the corporate level, they were always looking out for you. And then once it just gets really, 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 really big and expanded, you start to wonder if those eyes are still on you, or are those people still here, or if those people left. Who is there going to be somebody who replaces them, who's going to still be looking out for me in the studio, because of, we love that family feel to the studio. I think it continues for some people there to kind of, or any studio, like to feel like you're being looked after,
Right.
In the industry. Because I know that back in the days for the Disney, or Disney, I think was like that when they first started. Then at some point they got just so big that they turned into a turn and burn, right? What they call turn and burn studios, where you just kind of grab artists, use them, burn them out, they're gone. And so there's a tendency for some of these studios, if they're not careful, they get too darn big, and then you get that reputation for the turn and burn. And I think there's a lot of artists right now who are currently in the studios worrying about that happening, because has really less to do with the fault of the studios. It's just more it's more the current trend of the industry right now. Like, can the studios afford to maintain their employees in the animation industry, right? Or do they need to start shifting their paradigms towards, more freelance
Right.
type paradigms? And I think that has less to do with it being the studio's fault. It's just more sustainability. How do we sustain workers in this industry anymore, right? It's getting
hard.
Scary. It's getting hard.
I mean, especially around Southern California, I think that's one of the other things that comes along with being a creative person, is that you have to do things that aren't necessarily the most glamorous just to stay afloat and just to pay the bills. And I think sometimes at a certain point, like maintaining that level of work just to exist in a super competitive market isn't as appealing. People move to less expensive areas, or they find just a more sustainable way of living, whether it be avoiding burnout or just making less money. And I think that, like, everyone I've talked to who has worked on some big movie or been an art director in some big project, it's like the appeal of the glory of being credited on a movie gets less and less important to them, and it becomes way more about the sustainability. Like, do I see myself doing this for another 5 or 10 years? And maintaining that, like, that optimism or that love for painting. Because I know it's quite common to where people get into the industry because they love to draw and paint. And then, more and more money comes, they start to become a manager. And instead of doing art, they start managing people more and more. And then their day is kind of, instead of creating artwork, their day is replaced with emailing people, which is, I guess that's like a whole other thing. But, and I don't know, I guess it's like, both are okay. I'm not judging either decision, but I think at a certain point, if you want to paint and keep that a big part of your life, you still have to make that active decision to accept less of the glory or accept less of the stability in order to keep doing the job, And it's part of the reason why I started this conversation. It's like, it's less about like the technical things. It's more about like the why of doing it. Because I think if you can find the like, I love it because it gives me something to do every day, or it's allows me to be part of this community, or allows me to do whatever, that reason is going to drive you a lot more than any amount of glory.
It's got to be beyond the financial. It's got to be beyond that. It's got to be sustainable, right? It's got to be sustainable. You got to be able to afford to do it, to do what you're doing. But beyond sustainability, what else is going to drive you to do it? Because if you're only doing it, like you said, if your only motivation to do it is just, financial reasons, I love doing it, and this is what keeps me afloat, right? Those two in and of themselves, sometimes even that isn't enough. It isn't enough just to say, well, I love it, and it keeps me from going into debt.
Yeah.
At some point, even what you love in that industry, it can burn you out. And then what are you left with? What are you going to do after that happens? Once you get burned by it, because it happens really quickly. I noticed that happened to me in the industry. I got heavily burned out by the time COVID came around.
Yeah.
And I didn't see it coming, but I got way burned out doing what I was doing in that industry. And you'll notice burnout because the quality of your work starts to suffer. You'll start to see a decline in your work. But I remember back when I was just a concept artist, just a visual development artist, and I wish the young me or the older me could have told the young me, be careful what you wish for, right? And as a young person, I was like, I'm going to be an art director someday. I'm going to be a production designer. I want to be one of those guys.
Right.
I'm going to be one of those guys.
Glory, right?
Because I never, like I said, growing up as a kid, it was never about I was going to be an artist. I was going to be something. But I tell you, once I got in the door and once I made it and once I did everything I could to survive and stay in the industry, and before you knew it, I was getting signed on to contracts to stay, and they appreciated me and they valued me. You become ambitious. You really become ambitious. Then all of a sudden it changed everything changed. Now I was driven by ambition in the industry. Like I want to be that art director because it was in my sight, right? I could see it because there were conversations that I was having with producers and directors at the studio about possibilities. Like I never thought they would even consider me for these kind of things. Before you knew it, I'm like, well, it's in my peripheral vision. I can, in the future, I can see myself being an art director. Then you get very ambitious. And then before you know it, like I want it, no matter how hard I have to do to get it. And I got it. And then I was doing art directing more than production design. And I was art directing for a while. But God, does that burn you? It really, really does burn you. One thing I noticed was when I was just a viz dev artist, concept work, you get left alone. All your job, 8 hours to 10 hours, depending on, depending on what part of production, you're just being left in your room to create. You're being creative, and that's all you're doing. You're not going to meetings. You're not going to dailies. You're not going to rounds. You're not doing anything other than every now and then the directors come to check in on your work. Nothing but your own work. You're doing that all day long and all night long. Once I stepped into the shoes of an art director, or even production design, all of a sudden I was doing less of the work, less and less and less. And it was more meetings and it was more rounds, yes and no, and then maybe, going, taking a look at people's and just kind of making notes on their stuff. But before you knew it, the people who used to be, maybe even some of these people were my students at one point, and they get into the door and they were working for me at some point, they were all of a sudden passing me up, like their work right there, because of how much they were just focusing on their craft. And I was focusing more on production. I became more of a manager in that role. And that's why I wish the adult version of myself could have told myself, it may not be worth it. It may not be worth you getting into this big maybe art directing. Yeah, I liked that. But production design role was, and I didn't do a lot of it. I hardly did any of it. But production design role, it's just meetings all day. And then sometimes they'll even pull the art director. And then some shows don't have a production designer, depending on the studio. Some shows, like I did TV, you're just an art director. The art director is the production designer. So like I filled both of the shoes at once. And it was just meetings all day long. And then I had a whole bunch of stuff on my plate that I had to try to finish. So yeah, it got to be really difficult to keep up with that pace. And what I ended up doing was more of the things I didn't wish for. Yeah. I didn't know that that's what an art director, production designer was going to do. I'm thinking, you'd be the creative person at the top, but you're not doing as much of the work anymore. You're not, maybe in the very beginning, you're setting the tone, and maybe if you're lucky, they'll give you several months to a year to do a whole bunch of creative work. But once production sets in, you're just kind of going from meeting to meeting at that point. And I just noticed a lot of the artists I was working with, they were getting really good because while I was going to meetings, they're being left alone in their room to be creative.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that's a part of me that was like, if I had it to rethink over again, maybe I would have just stuck to art direction, but tried to bounce back more, like take breaks off of shows. If they allow you, if the studio allows you to just take breaks and go back and just do nothing but visual development for like another show and then come back to art directing, which I think they do, you know?
Yeah.
But sometimes what happens is once you become this art director, sometimes the studio doesn't have as many art directors or production designers on hand, and they kind of want to hurry up and get you onto another show sometimes if you're good.
Right.
And so sometimes it all depends on the timing.
Well, and I think, you know, somebody said something to me a while ago, which is like your happiness rests in your day-to-day habits, you know, and it's like you get $1 billion, but you have to work 100 hours a week. You know, it's like, maybe not, you know, maybe that's not worth it for a lot of people, you know, and it's like, well, if you have your time now and, you know, you have the option to do that $1 billion, maybe you have $1 billion worth of value just right in front of you because you have all your time in front of you, you know? And it's something that I asked everybody on the podcast has been, would you be doing the same thing you're doing exactly right now if you had $1 billion? You know, I don't think I could pay you to stop painting. You know, there's no amount of money that I could give you to where you never can pick up a paintbrush again, can never be creative. And I think that the more someone is able to reach whatever their ideal is, if they didn't have to worry about money and status, while also just surviving, that's the goal ultimately, you know? For me in this podcast, it's like, I love having these conversations, you know, like as long as we've had the conversation so far, it's already been a victory, you know, whether it gets 100 views or 10,000 views or 100,000 views, hopefully that doesn't matter as much to me. The only reason the views are important is because it lets me do more, you know? And I think creatively, it's like, I'm definitely compromising in a lot of different ways, but I guess I'm trying to be as close to like doing the thing I'd want to do every day as possible, while also like not starving to death. And at least when I see like people that I think are living like no one's ever going to be exactly perfect, but the people that I know that are at least happy or able to keep doing it, or even people that I know that are tremendously successful. It's people that like are able to do what they care about every day. And they've found some way of like monetizing it or turning it into a business. It might not be exactly like the most sexy thing in the world, but it's still like a thing that's related to it, you know? Like I suspect you'd say like maybe teaching wasn't something you expected yourself to do, but you kind of fell into it and it might've been something that was like a pleasant surprise.
No, that one I always kind of figured I would do. I was such an introvert, an extrovert growing up. I was always doing it. I was always speaker. I was always in school. I was always going up and giving talks. And whenever I could, I was a teacher's assistant. I was always that kind of a person, right? But I kind of knew at a young age, even when I was going to ArtCenter, I had it in me to want to be a teacher because of that aspect of being an extrovert. Right. For sure. I talk a lot. I talk a lot, but there's just this eagerness in me to give back. All right. It's just the aspect of giving back. So it never really surprised me that teaching would have become the biggest thing. I always had it in my mind. In fact, when I was leaving ArtCenter, like, you know, hey, maybe one of these days I can just come back to ArtCenter and teach. You know, and I still kind of get that in my mind every now and then, like either ArtCenter or another college or something, and just continue to teach at one of these university levels or something, because I love collaboration as well. And I think that's why I excelled at being an art director. And I loved being an art director. Don't get me wrong. I never want to say I didn't love doing it. It's just, if you were one of the depending on the show I was working on, it pulled me away from so much of the actual painting part of it, right? Yeah. Of being able to do the artwork, that I kind of felt like I was missing out on on excelling. So I actually lost track of what we were talking about for a second. What was it?
Like how you fell into teaching and yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. Falling into it. I think the first opportunity was when I was still an instructor. I was still a student at ArtCenter. And, one of the landscape painting teachers, the only class I ever taught there at Art Center for landscape painting was taught by this fantastic painter named Ray Turner. And he taught the landscape painting class there. I took one of, I think, only 3 or 4 terms he ever taught there. And before I even graduated, the department chair of illustration, Phil Hayes, reached out to me before I even graduated. It was like, hey, do you want to take over the class for when Ray leaves? I was like, right after I graduate? Sure. Which is unheard of, but I was like, yeah. So I took it over, and that was like the first time I ever taught anything. It was right after I graduated. So even when I was working at DreamWorks, I was always teaching. And I think it was mostly Art Center. I taught most of my classes, and it was all landscape painting classes. Did that for about 4 years, and then I took a break to start focusing mostly on what I was doing at DreamWorks. And then I would just kind of bounce back and forth. I'd come back to Art Center, and maybe I would teach some night classes again or a weekend class. And then before you knew it, I honestly don't remember when it was I started to do workshops. I don't remember when and where those took place. But when I was doing the landscape painting classes, those were mostly Art Center for about, from 2000 to 2004. And then it wasn't until about 2005, 2006, I started following that group of painters, those concept artists, the Viz Dev team at DreamWorks, who'd go out and they'd paint the Burbank area, the trains, the industrial. I'd start doing what they were doing. I wanted to do it, and that's how I started getting into gouache, because most of those guys had a background they were background painters at one point before they became Viz Dev artists. So they painted with cell vinyl, and so gouache was very similar to cell vinyl. They're both very matte, like a vinyl acrylic. Whereas gouache isn't an acrylic, but it had a matte finish. So all these artists would go out at their lunch hour or after work, and they were painting industrial. I was like, I don't really paint industrial. I only paint landscapes, trees, parks. But I saw what they were doing, and I was totally inspired. And I failed at it miserably the first few times, but I just kind of stuck with it long enough, and eventually I came to really love industrial landscape painting. And I started teaching more and more of that at Art Center. But again, it's a little foggy and really hazy and weird. Like, where did I start to make the transition where I would start teaching workshops for like landscape painting and places like that? I'm honestly a little bit foggy as to maybe some of the first times I did it, and for who I might have done it. I think it started evolving from teaching classes. I started doing Concept Design Academy. My friend Kevin was running that school, and James Pike and several others and John Park were doing Brainstorm School, and I started teaching production classes for them. And it was mainly also just landscape painting, but digital, right? So I was teaching a lot of digital. But yeah, somebody might say, the past few years, these past 3 or 4 years, I've been kind of really transitioning heavily into fine art and contemporary and plein air and landscape. But it was, I'd say even back in like 2015, 2014, 2013, I was doing a lot of workshops for a lot of different institutions. And I think mainly it was because 2011 was the first time I ever got introduced to Instagram. My ex-wife at the time, she was all over it, and she introduced me to it. And when I jumped on there, I grew an audience really quickly. And I think it was at that point when I started getting asked to do a lot more teaching and a lot more workshops. And because I was posting a whole bunch of plein air.
Yeah.
And so at that point, watercolor societies and all these other schools started asking me, Scottsdale School, everybody started asking me to come up. So I kind of felt like since 2012, 2013, things really started to rise because of Instagram.
Yeah.
Before that, I think it was mostly just Art Center.
Trying stuff
up to
out,
that point. Yeah.
Yeah. The odd thing about doing anything online, or I guess doing anything in general, is how intuitive it feels or how unimportant it feels in the moment. It's like the act of posting to Instagram is a pretty boring mechanical task, but then it's seen by 100,000 or 1 million people or whatever. And I think it's like the nature of, I guess, the things that I'm trying to do is just embrace more of just doing the work, you know, like glamorizing it less and just focusing on doing a good painting or a good podcast or whatever. Because the quality of the thing ultimately determines how that's the only lever you can really pull that will determine if the audience likes it or not. And doing that as much as possible, and sort of, it almost like seems like a career is like a slot machine. And if you just pull enough times, eventually something falls out and you're like, oh, I'm a production designer now, or I'm a concept artist, or I'm a rigger, or I'm, you know, doing Instagram or any number of those things. But you really don't know what direction you're going to go in from the very beginning.
No, it's funny because I never thought I'd ever go where I am today because of what Instagram has done. And I owe a lot of it to the exposure I got from that platform. But I remember when I started out, I think I had friends reach out to me after the first year, because I think after the first year I got to like 30,000 followers, which I guess is pretty fast. And I think it was due to the fact that I already had a stack of paintings.
Yeah.
And when I jumped on there, I was like, I guess I better post something a day. And so I posted each one every single day. And then people were under the
Impression that you're super fast.
God, this dude's painting every single
shredding,
day.
dude.
Wow, he's shredding.
Yeah.
But I think it's the algorithm, right? Back then there weren't a ton of painters on Instagram, and so I was in the right window at the right time to jump in and trip that algorithm, because I constantly was posting 1 to 2 paintings a day. And I think that really helped. And then also I was commenting on a lot of other people's things, but it grew really quickly. And I think I had friends, I had a friend of mine who was asking, he was a really great artist, and he's like, how did you do it? How do I build my audience like yours? What do I got to do? And I was like, dude, just start posting.
Just try, right?
Just put stuff up there. He goes, oh, I'm not ready. I go, what is it you're trying to prep for? He says, I want to wait till my work is just at this level, then I'll put it on. I go, it's not what you think. I wouldn't treat it like it's the gallery, right? I try to treat it like it's the window.
Yeah.
It's kind of the window, and people tend to want to like to see you progress over time.
It's like a business card or something.
It is, yeah. Like, so, when I'm posting my work in there, it is what it is until the next year, until the year after, and then the year after. Maybe they'll see my progress over time. Take it for what it is, right? And so, I told them, I said, instead of trying to wait for the right moment to post your stuff, put something up there and get some feedback, and people are going to enjoy seeing where you are now, and then as the days progress, growing with you, the crowd will grow with you as well. I think that's an important aspect of that platform, I think.
Totally. Well, and I think, for anyone that's listening to this, like someone might look at someone with 1 million subscribers on YouTube or 1 million Instagram, 2 million Instagram followers, but there is a strategy. It's like there is like a mechanical nature or some algorithmic thing you can figure out to getting more followers. Like, it's not like Instagram and YouTube are incentivized by advertisers to push your thing in front of people if it sells more advertising for them. Yeah. Right now, Instagram is no longer like an image-based platform. It's like videos with reels and shorts and stuff. And if you're wanting to gain followers, you make, like, if that's someone's only goal, they should be making reels, and it's like, it has nothing to do with the quality of their artwork. It's just the timing, the formatting.
True.
Something that's been really strange to observe in my own YouTube channel has been, like, I've been recording the podcast. I haven't changed. The way I've had these conversations it's the same from a few years ago. The only thing I've changed to get more and more views has been the presentation. Like, I spent a lot of time on the thumbnail and title, so I'll listen to the podcast a couple times just to make sure, like, get the overall theme and see if I can condense that down to like a short sentence, and then find a captivating thumbnail that people like, and I'll make 3 of those and I'll test them against each other to see which one gets the most engagement. And my views have gone up, like, again, like I was telling you before we started, like 10, 20, 200,000 views on some of them, which is not a lot in the context of YouTube. But for me, it's like, oh man, like it had nothing to do with my fame as an artist or credibility as someone, as a professional. It was just the presentation or the packaging of the thing that ended up, leading to more people consuming it. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's been a little bit of like an existential thing for me because I feel like I've been overthinking it the whole time up until that point where it's like, oh, it's a lot simpler than I thought it was. It's not like um, someone is born with inherent skill over the algorithm or, appeal. It's like a lot of it is just determined on like how they're able to communicate with the robot that ends up pushing their stuff to more people. Obviously, like skill and competence matters as an artist, but I think we both know people who are phenomenal, amazing draftsmen who aren't able to get followers just because
Absolutely.
the way that they make artwork just isn't geared towards what sells advertising for these platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. I honestly really you attribute the numbers I got in the beginning was just, it was timing,
Yeah.
My timing, getting in at the right moment. And then now if you're trying to get in, it's a heck of a lot harder to get past the algorithms. The algorithms has changed. You got to do a little bit more song and dance now, in order to get people to see your stuff. In fact, I can't post a reel without, Instagram saying, are you sure you don't want to put any music on there?
Right. Well,
Something on there to kind of get people's attention because they're like, remember, people are responding to reels now. And in fact, I've got friends who will, when they're doing their posts, they're doing live painting with music. Some of them are dancing while they're painting, like just to kind of get to that
spice it up, man.
Spice it up, get to the next level of like, hey, they know that they've done their research, right? They know what kind of gets the numbers, and people are engaged by dopamine, right? It's kind of comes down to dopamine and getting those. Does your reel spike someone's dopamine at this point?
Well, and it's also like, people look at likes as a metric, but when Elon bought Twitter, they leaked the algorithm for what they're looking for and what is weighted differently on a post. And the like is the lowest thing on the list. The next highest thing is like a save. So it's telling the platform that you're going to return to it. So if somebody saves your thing, it's like, oh, this person's going to return to it. So we have a chance to sell them more advertising. But the next highest thing is a send. So if you're sending it to someone, you're inviting whole other person to it. So they're doubling your advertising potential,
right. Yeah.
And the highest thing is like a reply to a comment. So if you reply to someone's comment, that means it's like 100 times higher weighted than a like, and it's like, if you're able to make stuff that gets a lot of saves on Instagram, you're a lot more likely to be able to grow because, again, all these things happening behind the scenes that you can't really, control. And I think thinking of things that way, it's like, again, it's not like luck. It's not like, the algorithm gods choose people sort of arbitrarily. It's based off like whatever those metrics are that are happening behind the scenes that kind of determine if someone is getting attention or not. I guess the important thing there for me is like there are levers or things that you could do that control the reception of the thing that aren't related to draftsmanship, and I feel like the important thing there for me is like the emphasis on draftsmanship above everything else, which I think is an important thing to value. But there are so many other factors that go into someone's success. Like, I was talking to some people who sell prints at conventions, and they were saying like when they switched from having their prints flat on a table to going upright, their sales like 10x'd or something. And it wasn't like changing their artwork, it was changing just the presentation of the thing that led to the sales.
Wow.
It's almost like psychology or something, or some like the draftsmanship is important, but also those things are important.
And I wish I really didn't have to worry about a lot of those things, right? Like for me, I want to do the art, I want to be creative and care less about the social aspects of things. But unfortunately, there has to be an awareness, right? Because that is my platform for how I drive my career. Not to say I honestly, totally, absolutely appreciate my audience for sure. And I'm, very appreciative of everything and and all the likes and all the comments and subscribing. But again, I try not to get too hung up on the tools within the metrics, right? Yeah. It's like, I don't want the metrics to drive me too much because then it'll drive me crazy because I'm not that good at it. It's just like, I'm good at the art. I'm good at the painting. I want to stick to my lane. But if I know a little bit about the metrics, I know a little bit about that, it'll kind of help me. So where I don't have to spend that much time, where I'd love for the metrics to drive themselves, but I have to point it in the right direction, at least somewhere, and stay on top of it and not lose relevancy in that arena. So I tend to do a little bit of homework every now and then, so that way I don't feel like it's lagging behind. If I feel like I do homework for a couple of days, study it, apply it, just leave it alone and let it do what it's going to do. And then I'll revisit it. I'll revisit the metrics and what metrics are doing later on again in the year.
Yeah.
Study it again to see how it's evolving, see how it's serving for me, because my outreach is an important part of what I do. I'm now starting to lean into this fine art, teaching, galleries, all of those things, right? And social media will really help. It's driving that for me. So I do, part of my homework is learning the metrics. Unfortunately, I do need to kind of know how it works.
Well, and I feel like, again, it always goes back to that balance thing, because one impulse from that perspective is to like be the scientist or be the engineer there, and just to go all in on the metrics and stop being a painter, and I think that's the danger, is to like hyper analyze things to the point where it no longer becomes like it's only logical, and it no longer has like a soul, And I think when it's only you start to see people only as the metric or only as a customer, then you lose that empathy and you lose that ability to even be like, to even have an audience in the first place, And I think maintaining that sort of like childlike or that optimistic side of just being creative, that's like that, to me, that's the hardest part of doing this stuff for a long period of time, just because like life gets in the way. It's like, when someone experiences like some health issue or, car accident or any number of things, it's like, that's another point in another tally for a reason to go and just be more analytical and logical, because it'll add more security. And I think it almost takes like practice or intentionality to, maintain that, just like, I'm just going to be a painter, or I'm just going to be a podcaster or a YouTuber,
Yeah, because I can get caught up. It's really, really easy to get caught up in the metrics, for sure. Like my brain, I'm very cerebral in that way. So I have a tendency to, if I do mess with it too much, I'll get stuck there.
Yeah.
But I want to be stuck here. I want to be stuck here. I want to be in this arena. And man, if I could afford it, I would hire somebody to do all of that for me. And at some point I'll probably need to revisit that and be like, you know what? Probably behooves me to just pay somebody, even if it's not all the time, but like maybe to point me in the right direction and maybe help set up all of that stuff for me, right? Take a look at just like your own financial portfolio, like a financial advisor, right? Get somebody to come on board and be like, okay, take a look at my social media and take a look at how I'm using all those metrics properly. Should I be looking at a YouTube channel? Should I be looking at that type of thing? Would monetization from those areas help? Or am I just looking at another avenue that's just like, it's too late at this point? Like I always ask myself all of those different questions. Like I've already taken myself so far, and I'm now mostly embedded in on Instagram, Facebook. I rarely even lean on it as much these days. I don't know how much people lean in it, to be honest with you.
I think everyone I know who's had a big Facebook audience is off of it, because it's no longer like everyone is off Facebook.
It's all political.
Yeah.
If I go
all political. If
I go to Facebook, it's just sometimes I'll just go there to see my friends and family fighting over politics. I'm like, nope, I'm out of here.
Right.
No matter what though, it's just automatically things from Instagram, thank God, just get shared to Facebook. And so it's like, all right, it's going there anyway. I don't have to go to Facebook and see everybody fight. But Instagram has just kind of become my platform. So, but yeah, I've started to wonder, whether or not I should start thinking about YouTube monetization, if it's too late at this point or not.
I don't think so. I think it's like, I think anyone that is listening to this that is curious about starting a YouTube channel, it is way easier than I think people, and it's not too late. I remember talking to Proco a couple years about this. It was when like Ethan Becker was getting really big. Like he had like maybe 60, 70,000 subscribers. And I was like, oh man, it's too late, and then he blew up and now he's probably close to 1 million and stuff. Wow. And I see that happen all the time where it's like, oh man, all these people that I said it was too late then, they've gotten big and they have businesses and they're able to have an audience around this thing. And I think it's like, I think it's like having that balance between like playing to the metrics. It's changed since then, and there's like a different meta or different way of doing it that people will resonate with. But it's like at least I know when I try to experiment or apply whatever is relevant and popular now, it does get me followers and views and stuff. And I don't know. I think also looking into the future, at least the way I know I consume media, it's like 70 or 80 or 90% YouTube and like 10% Netflix and HBO and all these different things. And I think when I ask my friends about their viewing habits, it's all mostly YouTube versus these like traditional streaming platforms. And it's not to say that like those don't have their own relevance, you know, but also like I think anyone is able to have like a niche business or a niche audience in whatever thing that they are doing just because YouTube is getting so large. Like,
Right.
I feel like I'm finding people all the time who have never heard of, who have like 5 million, 10 million subscribers. And, you know, they're doing some niche thing. Like I was doing some errands around my house and trying to do some home improvement stuff. And I found a channel with like 3 or 4 million subscribers, and they get hundreds of thousands or millions of views on all their videos. And I'm like, oh, this has never been shown to me before, you know? And it seems like they have a really strong and sustainable business just around this very niche thing that they're doing, you know?
It seems so overwhelming to just consider a whole other venue that I haven't even touched on yet. Like, cause yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that's been on my mind, and I've been really curious about, jumping into that channel, getting, you know, creating my own YouTube. But I'm like, I spend so much time just trying to run my own Instagram.
Yeah.
And my own website is falling behind right now because I spend so much time. People have gone on my website. They're like, do you list any of your workshops on there? And you know that there's a whole bunch of paintings that they say they're still for sale. Are they? And I'm like, no, most of those are sold.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I have to, like, I forget, like, oh my God, I have a website. I've been, the poor thing, I haven't even been paying attention to that. And then if I'm thinking about even trying to get a YouTube channel going, again, it just kind of comes into like, if it is something that I deem maybe a really wise investment, you know, maybe I do need to just kind of get somebody who creates the channel, and maybe somebody who runs my channel and my Instagram, or maybe I just have somebody running my YouTube channel only, and telling me what to do and telling me what to post on there. I don't know if that makes sense. I have no idea how that stuff works, but that's where my mind goes. I'm thinking, me trying to run that, trying to do this, trying to do workshops, trying to do my own website, and then trying to put my work on Instagram, and then announcements for the things I'm doing on Instagram. If I think about all those all at once, I'm back to like, okay, this is where I found myself when I was in entertainment.
Totally. Well, and the problem with all those things is individually at a big company, those are all separate careers. You know, it's like managing the website and the marketing and the actual art making and everything else. You know, those are all like a single person or a team of people would be handling all those jobs, you know,
Management.
and I like, if you wanted help with YouTube, at least getting it started, I can help you figure out like just like a format that you can do that would be easy to do.
I'll totally pick your brain on that.
And again, it is like math at a certain point. Like thumbnails and titles, there's like a strategy to it that will definitely, you know, get people attention. But it's like I think it's with art. It's like if you want to be a painter, you have to like specialize in as like a painter. Like you're a figurative painter or you're like an environment painter. And I think like running a business or being like an independent artist is the same. It's like, if you want to be good at YouTube, that's its own medium. You know, there's like video editing that you have to learn, and like all these different things that are their own disciplines of themselves. You know, and it takes a lot of work and consistency. In the same way that like learning how to paint, like I would love to be able to draw and paint more, but I'm spending a lot of my time just like making YouTube videos, and it's eaten away at my like ability to draw, just because like managing files and editing, it's like a skill, you know? And I think it's like somebody said another thing to me, which was like, one big realization in somebody's life was like, oh, I could be anything, you know? I could be like an astronaut or a football player or a ballerina or whatever. It's just how much work I put into it. And then the next thing is like, but I can't be everything. Like at a certain point, you have to like choose.
You do have to choose.
You know, and I guess it goes back to that why thing. It's like, well, you know, if you want to like make a lot of money, then maybe working in corporate America is like a way to go. But it's harder to be like a painter, you know?
Right.
And if you want to be a great painter, again, you have to decide to paint. Like I had Brian Mark Taylor on a couple years ago when I was visiting Utah, and he has Sentient Academy, and I think it's like a good business and everything. But he was telling me he was like stepping away from it a little bit, even though it's like a less efficient business model, because he just wants to be a painter. Like almost at a certain point, if you want to be an artist, you have to make the decision to be an artist, because doing paintings at the level that you're doing them takes a lot of work to just maintain the skill and just to get better and feel like you're, you know, doing something good. I suspect so, at least. And I guess it's like almost making that like intentional decision that the work that you're doing is more important than like the other things that you could be doing, you know?
Yeah, there's an ebb and flow to management, right? I think, and to try to kind of go back and forth on those things, because you're right. You know, I've noticed that I need to just, if I'm going to get better, like from where I am now, if I want to just stay where I am, it takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
Right. To make sure I don't slack and maintain what I do, that in and of itself already takes a lot of work. I got to be painting something every day with real paint and with digital paint. I got to be doing something every day, just for maintenance. But if I want to go to the next level, it takes more than that.
Yeah.
And when you realize that, right, you realize, okay, you're going to go, and you can't hit it hard like that all the time. You're going to burn out.
Yeah.
But you're going to need to go through these cycles in your life where you're like, okay, there are ebbs and flows. Like maybe I'll kind of back off the brakes a little bit so I can give myself room here to work on my social media and all these other things that need, you know, my attention. That'll kind of help drive this. And then at some point you then have to come back and decide, all right, now this particular window, if I'm going to get really, really good, or let's say I have a show coming up and I want that to be amazing, maybe I do need to hire somebody in that window of time to run, you know, that I rely on to kind of step in for me when I can't do it. I'll have that person step in and help me, because I'm going to need to just focus on this 100%.
Right.
And I'll notice in order for me to get better, I have to get lost in it.
Yeah.
And I'm embarrassed to say that when I get lost in it, the dishes pile up.
Yeah, me too.
The laundry piles up.
Yeah.
That's when I know it's working, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I noticed the laundry piles up, the dish piles up, the bills, thank God they're all on auto pay, because they would pile up because I'm in it, right? And then my sleep starts to suffer, because it's a weird thing that we sacrifice in order to get really good at something. I don't know. I mean, this is probably not the same for everybody, but for me, and a lot of people I know, they all kind of be like, I know, me too. You know, like when they really want to get better at something, in order to get into the zone, they're like, yeah, like to get into the zone, all of a sudden I'm eating junk food and I'm not working out, and self-care is, you know, I'm doing it, but like I'm doing the minimal, right?
Yeah.
Everything just starts to back up, because all of a sudden it's just, oh, you're in it.
Right.
You are in the zone, and it's all about getting your work, and you're just obsessed with it. I'll go to bed thinking about it. It's the first thing I think about when I wake up in the morning when I'm trying to get better at something, and it just takes over everything. And then it just continues day after day after day. There's an obsession that locks into, you know, that painting I'm working on, or maybe I'm doing 2 or 3 paintings at the same time, and I'm just really doing my best to try to take it to the next level. For me, that's dangerous. You know, that I get into that mental mindset real easily if I want to get better and really push it hard.
Yeah.
I don't do that a lot. I really don't do that a lot, but I'll go through those moments. Usually it's because I have a show coming up, and if I haven't paced myself properly, I'm like, oh man, I'm going to be hitting this hard I got a show coming up in a month or 2 months. I'm going to be hitting this hard every day.
Yeah.
And I'll notice that it just kind of sucks all of my energy.
Right.
Well, and I think the important thing there is like it is that choice where it's like if you can't, you have to choose something. You can't be everything. Like if you want to be a painter, you can't also be, you know, like ultra athlete guy. You know, if you want to be ultra athlete guy, then you can't. Like if you want to do both, then you also can't do another thing. And it's eventually you're going to have to make a sacrifice to be like, okay, well, I'm good at these things that I really value, but I'm not hanging out with people as much. And there's a sacrifice there, you know. And no matter what, like you have to be okay making that sacrifice. You have to be okay with who you are and your identity. You have to be okay with your own warts or your own perceived flaws with things, you know? Sure. And it's like, I think it's interesting, like looking at famous directors or famous CEOs, because they are deeply flawed people. They're just like us. They just like went all in on like, well, I'm going to omit all these other things, but I'm going to make the iPhone, you know? Like Steve Jobs was notorious for being mean to people or being maybe a little bit dismissive of people, but his impact is like inarguable, you know? Yeah. And I think it comes down to like, I guess, like, what do you want personally, you know? For something like YouTube, like I feel like I've made that intentional decision to draw less and to create less images in order to just focus on making videos. And like the success of the videos has been reflected in that sacrifice. But there is like a sacrifice there. It's like, I can't create as many images. I can't pursue this other thing that I also really care about because, you know, to really try to be in tune with what people want to watch, I have to like, you know, like just put my blinders on. You know, my girlfriend is always teasing me because like I drink a lot of seltzer water and I'll have like 30 LaCroix on my desk, you know? And it's like, I won't even realize that they've all piled up over here, you know, because I'm like just focused on whatever thing that I'm focused on my computer. I don't know. Again, I think it's like the act of it will still feel the same. And again, I guess even the glory that you're receiving from doing this thing better and better isn't going to make it more or less validating. It's just that the act of doing it just becomes more and more engaging or validating in some way, you know? Something that I believe is I think somebody has to like earn the right to like paintings, you know? Like if you go into the Metropolitan Museum of Art and you go to like the Sargent wing, you know, where like the American wing where the Sargents are, I think at a glance, most people probably walk past them, and to really start to appreciate them, you have to like understand figurative painting a little bit. You have to understand like the context of like a brushstroke and how difficult it really was, you know? Or like even to appreciate like athleticism, like when you hear about someone running a sub 2-hour marathon, that's crazy, but like at a passing glance, you're like, oh, that's cool. But when you are a runner, you know, I'm not a runner, but like, I'm sure if I were to run more, that achievement of running a marathon in under 2 hours would just get crazier and crazier to me because I've had that context on how hard and how unique that person really was, you know?
I think it's a matter of being able to relate, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us don't relate to something. If you can't relate to it, it doesn't really connect to you sometimes. And that's why I think for children, they just throw a whole bunch of stuff that relates to them in terms of what dopamine will do for them, right? But yeah, and thinking about you and I touched on something we don't need to get into this podcast, but like something happened to me back in 22, which scared the heck out of me. You know, kind of went through a real scary health crisis, put me in the hospital and everything. And it was really, really terrifying. That context changed, the way I see things these days now. I have a whole new appreciation because of how I relate to what it means to be healthy and what it means to find peace and in your body, you know what I mean? And so I remember driving on the road. My son and I were driving somewhere and we're just looking out at the hills, something I normally wouldn't have cared about, other than just being an artist and saying, oh, I think those hills are cool. When I paint them, I love those shapes, blah, blah, right? Because I can relate to, as an artist, shape vocabulary. So, but I was looking at these hills and I was looking at the cows and the horses on the hills. somewhere, and my son was in the car with me, and of course he was on his phone, and he couldn't take his eyes off his phone, like all of us, right? And I was like, hey, do you see those? Stop for a second and take a look at those horses and those cows out there, right? He's like, yeah. I go, do you see it? Do you see how peaceful they look, right? How stress-free they look up there. Would you say that they look peaceful to you? What do you see when you see that? And he said, it looks boring.
Yeah.
He goes, they look bored, Dad. They look super bored. They got nothing to do. I would hate to be a cow, and I would hate to be a horse on a hill with nothing to do. I would be bored as hell. I go, but you see, that's the thing. It says so much about our society and not appreciating the little things, the simple things. And after going through what I went through, I look at those cows and those horses, and I'm like, oh, to be able to just find peace in nothing.
Yeah, just eat grass.
To be able to just eat grass and feel the sun on your skin and be at peace.
Yeah.
And that's it. Not, I need this to make me feel better, or I need to watch content, or I need, therapy, or I need all these different things that are going to help me get to where I got to get to, right? It's like, it is, for them, all they need is the sun on their skin, and not to be eaten by another animal, of course. Yeah. But, to be fed, to be out in nature and feel the sun on their skin. And it's just like, they're at total peace. And to be able to relate to that in such a profound way, was amazing. It was just like, normally before this experience, I would have been looking at the horses and the cows being like, cool composition.
Yeah. It is practical to my life.
Practical to just cool composition. And now I look at that, I'm like, it's peace.
Well, I got really into C.S. Lewis's writing for a little bit, and here, like Mere Christianity, the book he wrote on Christianity, and him talking about how, like, I think he was quoting Paradise Lost, where it's like you can make a hell of heaven and a heaven of hell, and it's all just dependent on your perspective. Where, like, sometimes I meet people who are in very comfortable situations, who are living like their anxiety is super high, they're super worried about jobs and money and stuff, and I've been there, but it's like you could be in something that's comfortable physically, you're not starving to death, you're not being shot at, and still feel like your fight or flight response is going, Yeah. And I know that, like, it's like I also have met people who have been in situations, or financially, or, maybe they're in like a war-torn country or something, who seem to be happy, or at least content with what they have, They have like a bag of rice, and they're super stoked about that bag of rice, Yeah. And it's like, it's all just about your perspective,
Absolutely. Right.
And I think the important thing there for me is, like, there's a version of myself in 5 years that will look at the way that I'm living my life right now and, like, cringe at myself in some way, fundamentally. In the same way that if I look back on myself 5 years ago, I'll be like, oh man, I was really doing that. Like hindsight is 20/20, but you have to, like, in order to get to wherever your goal is, you have to have a direction, even if it's a bad direction. Like, it's better to be moving somewhere in some way rather than to be completely stagnant, Like, it's better to make a bad decision than no decision. Because, like, going, like, diagonally towards your goals, you're still at least, like, moving a little bit towards them, and then you could, like, redirect or reassess whatever you're doing.
Being flexible, less rigid, for sure.
And I'm sure that there's some, like, philosophical Buddhist thing within that of just, accepting that you are who you are in the moment, and you can't change that, all you can do is, like, pull whatever levers that you have control over in the moment. Like,
for sure. Yeah. And, there's a lot of things, you start to come to terms with, especially when you get into your 50s for some reason. It wasn't until I hit my 50s, now that I'm 55, you really feel it. Right. You really feel existentialism, once you hit 50. It's just like, never really cared about that in my 40s, 30s, 20s, all the way up until 50s. You really feel that sense of age, not just physically, but mentally and existentially. Everything, at least for me and a lot of people I know, were like, yeah, the 50s. Yeah. Like, a lot of times, sometimes it was just the physical cues that told me, you're 50, like the way you feel and
Yeah.
your sleep quality, or not being able to perform the way you used to in terms of hormone levels or
Right.
all this other stuff. But like, I think for me, the scary thing is not having that same resilience that I had before 50. And I'm like, I need more resilience at 50 now, because I'm choosing to finally make a bigger move in my artistic career,
Right.
to start a bigger chapter where it's not a financial check that just automatically comes in on a salary week by week anymore. I have to drive it harder on my own. I'm the CEO of this business now, which means I have to work a lot harder than I used to work when I was younger.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit scary. And then you get older and you feel, okay, my hormones aren't as great as they used to be. I don't, have the testosterone of a 30 or 40-year-old anymore. And I have to figure out a way to like supplement or work out harder, change my diet. Everything changes, right? But the good thing that comes from all of that stuff is when purpose, gives you a reason, reason creates all kinds of interesting opportunity, right?
Yeah.
When it's necessary. Necessity creates pretty interesting things in someone's success. Like for me, it's like, oh my gosh, in order for me to be as successful as I want to be now, I have to survive. This is my job. This is what I do. I'm a fine artist now, and I'm teaching, and I now have to figure out how to have more vitality in my youth, at my age, to feel healthy again, stronger, to travel, to do all these workshops. What do I need to do? Well, I need to change my diet. I need to start exercising more. I need to meditate more. I need to do all these things I didn't do when I was younger, right? And because of necessity is the key to a lot of success, right? Like if it's necessary, you're going to do it. If it's not necessary, I was talking to another friend who is coming up on retirement, and he and I were talking about this, and he's worried about that. He's just like, I'm worried that when I retire, I no longer have a need to get up in the morning to go to work anymore,
right,
and to be at that job that I go to every single day. I was almost every day, and it was a big group of employees, right? I had a social environment. I had a lot of people. And when I retire, I won't have that anymore. I'm probably going to annoy my wife because I'm in her face all the time.
Yep.
And she was used to having her own time, and now she's got her time with me. And it's like, yeah, you got to continue to figure out a way to find purpose.
It never changes. It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you don't, we were talking about this. He was talking about the survival rates of like, depending on the career, right? They're like, yeah, the younger you depending on the career, the younger you retire, the better chances you have for living longer. However, if you don't, those who usually like males who retire tend to die shortly after retirement because they lose purpose. And the body senses there's no purpose. It just starts to shut down because it's like, well, why be here? And plus they lose their social, connections, right? They used to be in a job environment where not only did they have purpose, but they had friends and people, like a big, social connection. So it's a little, it's a really difficult thing. The good thing about my career and moving in this direction with the plein-air community and teaching is when I'm teaching, it's always with lots of people, right? Always a lot of people who are inquisitive about what it is you have to say and want to do. And so there's a lot of interaction. And then within the plein-air community, that's big. There's broad. There's a lot of painters. I'm in a group of painters, the Plein-air Painters of America. There's about 50 of them in there. So I'm well connected with that group. And Laguna Plein-air Painters, I'm connected with them. So there's a real robust community of people. So I'm thankful and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
But those are the kind of things, because of that necessity, it keeps me on my toes. It's like, yeah, as I'm starting to, like, I'm just barely getting started in my mind. Whereas most of my friends are finished.
Yeah.
They're just like, oh, this is where we're done at this point.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like if you ask,
it's that saying is like, if you ask and you shall receive. Like if someone is asking for a thing to do, anyone listening to this, whether financially stable or not, and they're just bored or they're wanting something else in their life, if you say like, I want to be a plein-air painter, like there's an obvious next step, which is to go and buy an easel and go painting, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, and if you ask, you shall receive, you know, it's like, if you ask, you will receive purpose, but you have to genuinely ask, you know? In the same way that like, I want to do this podcast, the consequence of that is having to drive 4 hours up here, which is like, if I ask, I will receive something to do. And if I actually go and do that, then something else after that can happen. And if I just keep following those asking and then getting the task to go and do it, eventually leads to like this podcast being released and being consumed by people, and then it leading to other things. But it starts out with that authentic, like following whatever the next step is, you know, and almost like being humble enough or being like okay enough with doing the work that like to be able to, you know, actually like be a person, you know. I think often people might glamorize the act of being a famous artist or a famous CEO or something, where they might think that once you reach a certain level, then you're suddenly not having to like take out the garbage, you know, you're not like, you transcend to a point to where you no longer take a shit. You know, it's like there's an interview with Dave Grohl where he was talking about, he had just played a show to like 100,000 people. He was on top of the world, and he came home and his daughter is like, you said you'd make me a smoothie. You know, it's like, no matter what, there's still something that will pull you back to reality, to, you know, you just still being a person, still having to go and do the things that just, you know, you have to do to maintain just being a person, you know?
And those to me are the things that keep me grounded.
Yeah.
And to me, like that aspect of what you just talked about with Dave Grohl, that's fatherhood. And for me, that was one of the, thank goodness in my life for my son, you know. I have a son, and he's my, like, just everything to me. And then I've got my dog, of course, she's a sweetheart, but those are the things. I have my family, I have my health, I have my friends. Those are all the things that keep me grounded, and I have my art. All of those things are grounding for me, and they keep me real, and they keep me honest, you know. So a lot of things I took for granted when I was, you know, growing up, and when I was working in the industry, and to try to excel and become really big. When I was working in DreamWorks, I kind of felt like I abandoned a lot of those things, not on purpose, but it just happened because I was so ambitious. I didn't get to see my family as much, really didn't get to see my friends as much. You know, now it's all about I'm trying to reconnect with as many of my friends from high school and elsewhere, new friendships,
yeah,
and really treasuring and really, what do you call it? Fostering those friendships, right? Doing everything and anything I can to foster friendships and foster the relationships that I have in my family as well. And then deciding what is and what isn't good for you, right? What people you've had in your life that just don't really benefit you.
Yeah.
And you don't benefit them. And if that's the case, then why do it, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's helped to know that I've had my son, and helped to know what type of things do keep me grounded and keep me appreciative.
Yeah. Well, and I guess it always goes back to simple things, you know, it's never not that. And again, I think that's what makes someone empathetic in the first place. Like, even to make the first Shrek movie, you still need all this money and all this structure and all this corporate funding to make it work logistically. But it's about a lonely guy who lives in a swamp who finds a girlfriend, you know, fundamentally. And it's that like human story that ends up becoming something that's truly like a cultural phenomenon that has lived for 20 some odd years or something. And at least the nature of everything that I'm trying to do is like maintain a level of authenticity and creativity, and like, I guess, trying to stay humble while also like embracing some of the more like logistic control, like order side of things, you know. It's like finding that balance between just like the natural chaotic nature of just being a person and the emotional side of things, while also being logistical and practical with like paying the bills and sacrificing some of the creative stuff just to keep doing it, you know. I think that like I've just been amazed by how every conversation I've had, everyone is constantly going back to like, yeah, sure, it's awesome to win an Emmy or an Oscar or to have X amount of followers or something, but that's not the reason I do it. I do it because like I enable someone else to have a job because I employ them, or I am able to reach X amount of people and inspire them to go be creative themselves because of this YouTube channel or something. And that being more so the fuel than any amount of accolades or money or followers and anything ever really could be.
And to find balance, I think, you know, I really liked watching that special on Netflix. What was it called? The Octopus Friend or Octopus? I think it was Octopus Teacher is what it was called. It was a documentary on, I believe it was Netflix. And it was about a cameraman or a DP or something like that who worked in the film industry,
yeah,
who faced major burnout and horrible depression from his burnout. And I think he lived in Australia. Anyway, he retired early because of all of that, his mental and physical health, because of burnout. And burnout is something that's, they kind of say that most people will face burnout, which is why we have retirement, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, you know, they're finding that studies that people are burning out younger and younger. It used to be the projection was you burn out in your 50s and 60s. They're finding that people are burning out in their 20s and 30s now. That's scary. And they say a lot of it's driven by, dopamine burnout in the industry. But and people are just, we're one of those societies that runs ourselves to the ground as compared to a lot of other cultures where they don't work the way we work, you know, like our mindset for work is just like so hard nosed and working long hours, not taking our vacations, you know, smell the roses. But this documentary, The Octopus Teacher, was this cameraman. He retires after burning out. And he's living in a seaside community somewhere where he has access to the beach right in front of his house. The water was very cold, so he decided to do these cold plunges and started swimming in the ocean. And at some point, the body adapts. But at first, the shock of being in cold water like that had a lot to do with it. He said a lot to do with his fight or flight response. That said that it had a lot to do with his nervous system being dysregulated. And the more he did these swims in the ocean, the more calm he found. And then the more it reset his nervous system, and his depression settled and went away. And it just kind of said a lot about what he was, what the industry was doing to him, or what he was allowing the industry to do to him. Because he figured, well, in order for me to be successful, I've got to do this, right? For my children, for myself, to be ambitious and to be great. The long hours and not connecting with your family and your friends and nature burned him. But he ended up, making friends with an octopus, so to speak, right? Like he got to know this octopus and swam with this octopus for days and days. I don't remember where it ends up. I think the octopus gets eaten.
Of course. Yeah.
Something happens, I think, to it. But anyway,
all,
But the value I found on that story was the balance, I don't think the story isn't to like avoid working really hard, right?
Yeah.
In order to be successful in that industry, in the Hollywood industry or the entertainment industry, you've got to be prepared to work hard, no matter what. Hard work. Like a lot of other things, right? The entertainment industry is like a lot of other things where you've got to work really, really hard. And you're going to put in a lot of hours, because these are companies that, multi-million-dollar investments that expect a return, and they'll push on you to get it. All right. So there's nothing wrong with knowing that, but I think it's also, I don't think there's enough of that awareness where I noticed that when I went to ArtCenter, we had guest speakers come in, and I guess what they did is they tried to train us on meditation. They said, okay, this is what I want you to do, and I want you to meditate. But I don't think there was a big enough emphasis on burnout, right? On, hey, pace yourself so you don't, right? So you don't burn out, because you are going into an industry that has a really high rate of burnout.
Yeah.
And then make sure that you're pacing yourself while you do this. And make sure that you do have the tools available to you so you don't, and that you can sustain yourself. And then just because you are asked to do something doesn't always mean that you have to say yes in that industry. You know, you can still be you can still sustain a lot of success and not have to always say yes to whatever it is they're asking you to do there.
Right.
In fact, you'll be better if you feel like you probably can't, even though in your mind, there's some itch in the back of your brain saying, but if you say no, you could be passing up on an amazing opportunity. There could be that little voice in the back of your head that's warning you. Cause I remember those little voices saying, be careful, telling me, be careful. That's a lot of stress. That is a lot of responsibility. But then the ambition creeped in. Yeah.
The glory, right?
The glory. Yeah. I can do this. If I'm going to make it, if I want to make it, I got to do it. I got to prove to myself and prove to the studio that I can do it. And there is also a mindset being taught in the industry, right? We were told. I was told by fellow artists, and I was told by fellow producers and stuff, like, hey, we don't go home until it's done.
Yeah.
We work. And everybody here just puts in, like, no matter what, you will do overtime.
Right.
It's mandatory.
Even if it means like spending time away from family and
the things that really, really matter, right? The things that really, really matter the most, more than that show, more than the money you're going to make in that show. The most important thing is what keeps you grounded.
Yeah.
Right. That's your success. That's your investment, your mental health and your physical health. Both of those two things together. So for me moving forward right now, I now know that, okay, it's all comes down to pacing, right? Yeah. You pace yourself with all of these things moving forward. I'm going to have to push for a lot of things, but now I listen a little more intently, and then I prep. I make sure that I prep for the pacing, saying, am I ready?
Yeah.
Am I listening to my body? Because my body will tell me.
Right.
Before, sometimes if I try to listen to my mind will trick me and say, you could do this. And sometimes my mind will tell me, like, no, that's too stressful. But sometimes my ambition oversteps what my mind thinks I should do. Mm. But if you listen to your body, it's your nervous system that's attached to your mind. Your body kind of like, you feel it a little bit.
Don't do that. Yeah.
Don't do it. Yeah. Just be careful what you're getting yourself into. Listen to your body and pay attention to the tone,
Well, the crazy thing about that too is, like, when you really acknowledge that there's other things inside of yourself that you don't have control over, I think it can be a little bit of like an existential crisis, that you're not entirely in control of who you are. Like, you have other things that are trying to influence that like your subconscious that are trying to influence who you are. Like, you could know something at a subconscious level, but not at a conscious level, And, I used to, find it weird when people say, I'm going to go try and find myself. I'm going to go on this soul searchy journey to figure out who I am. I used to not understand what that meant, but it's like, you're really trying to figure out, like, who are you beyond, like, what at like an objective conscious level, like, if you had the choice between two different things, what would you choose? Like, if you had the choice between the $1 billion or not taking the $1 billion, like $1 billion, you're super stressed out, or not $1 billion, but you're not stressed out at all. Like, which one do you choose, And it's different from person to person. Like, I lived in a van for a few years, and I drove around the US, just like literally I would just explore. I'd go to a new town to see what I would do. And part of the thinking there was just trying to pay attention to how I spent my time. Like, I would be in the Grand Canyon and I would be on my phone playing a video game, And it's like, well, from one perspective, like, one of the most beautiful things in the world is right outside of my van, and I could go and have this incredible life-changing hike, or I could sit in the van and play this video game. And honestly, what I wanted to do in that moment was just listen to myself and be comfortable, And I know for a fact other people make different decisions, but like figuring out what sort of decisions that you make in different situations, that's like all there really is. Like that guy who had that transformative experience with that octopus and cold water, that was always in front of him. Cold water is always there, you know?
Right.
It's just his ability to see that as a thing even worth trying and doing, you know? That's the thing that changed is his perspective, you know, and his ability to like be open to things. And I think it's like, to me, it's something like everything that you want is right in front of you. You just don't want to look at it, you know? Like maybe if someone's struggling with depression and anxiety and just trying to feel good day to day, maybe they're waking up too late. Maybe it's like they should clean up their diet, you know, and maybe that'll have a transformative experience over their mood and,
Right.
you know, just and their careers and all that kind of stuff. But maybe they really like Doritos or something, you know? And I think it's like acknowledging that maybe there's something that you don't know or some fundamental way that you can change that will have a profound effect on the way that you, or like anybody can go about their lives and kind of get closer to whatever their goals are.
Yeah, and I think sometimes in order to hear that voice, it's, you know, that who you are. Like when you hear people say, I'm going to go on a soul-searching mission and find myself, sometimes that's all about, you know, like these silent retreats. I never really got them right. And I've never done one, but I have a brother-in-law who is a great person and he went and he does them and he talks about them. I was like, well, what do you do at a silent retreat? He goes, it's not what you do, it's what you don't do. You know, you go there and you turn your phones off and nobody talks and, you know, everything's quiet and it's peaceful. You're in a peaceful retreat. And the goal in that is for all the noise to settle, everything to kind of settle and bring down your stress levels. And usually when the dust settles, right, is basically what it's about, making sure that all the dust settles and resetting your dopamine threshold. Because we live at a dopamine threshold that's like this now. It's all the way up here.
Yes.
When it should be down here at that base. We have it up. Now we kind of feel like this is normal. And after doing a silent retreat, it resets your dopamine pathways and your threshold. And you come back and then you can then see more clearly, oh, I can see past the noise. Yeah. I can see past, like, for example, after doing a silent retreat, if let's say you're gone for a week, and you've done a silent retreat and you've reset your dopamine and you've come back to this place of calm. When you get back to the city and you get back to normal life again, you really, really get a sense of just how much chaos you've been living in. Yeah. Like all this time, I had no clue that it's been this chaotic. It's been this loud. Like friends of mine who've done silent retreats, they come back and they're telling everybody, turn that down. Yeah. TV's too loud. Can you turn that off? And like everything's too much when they come back. They come to realize, oh my God, I've been used to this. I've been buried in all of this. And I, you know, you adapt, right? Your brain and your body. But just because it can adapt doesn't mean it's good for you. It just gets used to all the noise and the stimulation. And then when all that dust settles, you can kind of see who you are in that moment. You know, I think there's more purity in being able to find out who you are, what you want, what you need. But if you're trying to do it in this moment of overstimulation, it's sometimes hard to see it past the noise.
Well, and the other crazy thing, like the perspective stuff as well, is like there are times in my life when I'm eating cleaner and not as clean, you know, and when I'm eating cleaner and I go back to eating junk food, I am like amazed on how sweet or salty and how bad I feel afterwards. But when I'm eating nothing but junk food, I'm like, oh, this is normal. Like eating Chick-fil-A every day or whatever. My body adapts to that being the new normal. Like you hear about people who are able to drink 2 liters of Coca-Cola a day, like 100 grams of sugar every day. And they seem perfectly normal, but that's just their new normal. And they really just have no frame of reference for how much they might be internally suffering.
At some point, there will be a breaking point, right?
Yeah, that's
for that. In anything in excess at some point. I had that happen recently. I was teaching a workshop and my feet were just killing me. It's like, why do my feet hurt so much? They were hurting so much. And then I noticed they were swollen, like they were puffy. Like, why are my feet puffy? I never had puffy feet like this. And I couldn't connect it, and so I was talking to, some family members. They're like, well, what's your salt intake been?
Yeah.
I was like, I thought about it. I was like, for the past 2 or 3 months, I had been looking up recipes on TikTok, right, to find out some good dinner recipes. And the one thing that I noticed in these dinner recipes is, oh, wow, they really throw a lot of spices on there. Yeah. And they ask for my favorite, well, no, not anymore, but my favorite nighttime dinner was, chicken, like ground chicken or ground turkey. And I'll just put a packet of chili seasoning or taco seasoning in that, and even throw some salt on top of it, and I would make my meal, and it was tasty. I'm like, oh, that's really edible. And then I would open up a can of beans, chili beans, or pinto beans, and throw that. And my friend was like, or my family member was like, you need to read all the sodium that comes from everything you just put, especially if you're eating on top of that, if you're doing any takeout food or fast food. And when I backpedaled all the research on it, hey, if you're doing anything over 2,000 to 3,000 milligrams of sodium a day, you're overdoing it. And so that was the only thing that changed is TikTok. I went on TikTok and I was like, oh, now I know how to make real tasty dinners at home that taste like the food you get at the restaurant. Why? Because I was throwing copious amounts of sodium. And so all I changed was I stopped adding packets of seasoning to my food, and I backed off some other sources of sodium. In 3 days, my feet just went right back to normal. I was like, holy smokes, the amount of what we think is normal in our diets, what we're consuming. And it just made me kind of, I thought about it and I was like, okay, some of that is age related too. But as we get older, we got to start paying even more attention to those things. But I was like, okay, so that's the things I'm putting in my body. What are the things I'm listening to here and putting in my body here, like here, and here, all of those things contribute as we get older, and you got to pay attention to, I guess.
Well, and I'm not going to discount depression as something that's only diet based, but
No, not at all.
Well, it's definitely real. People actually have depression that is clinical and they have to be treated for. But I would also say that a lot of anxiety and depression can be treated with just changing someone's diet, like more than you might expect. And I know when I'm eating cleaner, eating less cookies and ice cream, I just feel better. I'm more optimistic. I'm more energetic. I'm just a better person overall. And, I was eating really clean for a couple days. And then a couple days ago, I had a bunch of gummy worms and a crumble cookie and fast food and all this stuff. And the next day I felt like complete garbage. And I was like, oh my God, there was a time in my life when I might've been doing that like every other day, when I was younger, maybe 20, maybe just a kid. But it's like maybe that anxiety or that depression that I felt wasn't a result of anything else other than my diet,
Right. Yeah.
And I guess it comes to, another thing where it's like, you really don't know what you don't know. Like, I forgot which law it is, but it's like, and the more that you learn about something, the more you realize how incompetent you are at it. And when you really start to pay attention to biology and just psychology and stuff, there's so many things that over time will have a huge effect on your mood. Like, we look back at the 1950s and people smoking cigarettes on train cars and in restaurants as extremely unhealthy, unethical, all these different things. But people might look back at us in 50 years and be like, they were really spending that much time on their phones. They let their kids have phones. Like, what the heck were they doing?
That's a big one. That is.
Yeah. And it's like that, like you don't really know how much damage you might be doing to yourself until like, oh, okay, But I think the next step to that is like you hear it and you either reject it and you're like, oh no, there's no way that's what's causing this. It's something else. Or someone's like, oh, maybe that's it. Maybe I I can like humble myself and be willing to like listen to someone else's expertise on this particular field and trust that maybe I'm doing something wrong, or maybe I'm not, maybe there's still stuff that is left for me to learn, you know?
And there's so much, we don't give ourselves enough credit to listen to our body, right? And understand what's going on with it. In some ways, you really do need to learn to become the CEO of your own body. So we tend to go to the doctor's office and we're like, the doctor gives us a diagnosis, whether it's a medical diagnosis or a psychiatric diagnosis. And they're like, you have depression. You need to take these pills for that depression. And you surrender to it because you're like, well, that person is the CEO of my health because I paid them money to be my CEO. When in fact, they're not. You are the CEO. When you pay them to look over your health, they're like an employee of your health. And if there's something that doesn't seem right to you about how they're treating your health, because they're working for your health, because you're paying them, it's your money, right? If it doesn't seem right to you, that's where you got to go in and you got to get so many more different second opinions, third opinion, fourth opinions. Because like you said, with your diet, right? Like if you went to a doctor about your mental health and you kind of noticed there was a decline in your mood over several days or something, they might diagnose you by the DSM-5 and be like, nope, this person, he's got depression he checks off all the boxes. And then sometimes, yeah, it's all, maybe there's a mood disorder, right? And it has nothing to do with your diet. It's got everything to do with your biology, and that's it, and family history, whatever. And you got what you got. And, you manage it.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, all these different things that go into it, like low dopamine from too much overstimulation, like looking at, rapid, if we're going through TikToks, and the brain wasn't meant to go like this, and change channels with so many different moods. This channel is this mood. This channel is saying this. This is this, and doom scrolling and all that stuff. The brain, it's not designed to do that, and it'll let you know that it can't. And so other things as you get older, and I can only speak for men, not women, but women have their own issues with their hormonal health. But for men and their hormonal health, we start eating too much junk food and staying up late. Well, that's going to compromise your hormones. So for example, if you won't know this, right? But like if you're eating too much sugar, if you're drinking too much alcohol, if you're staying up too late, you're spiking cortisol, right? Your stress hormone is now up, which the opposite of cortisol is testosterone. Now your testosterone is dropping. And if men, especially as you get older, you have too much stress and that stress hormone's up, sugar, junk. When testosterone drops, the first thing you're going to feel is low mood. You're going to feel anxiety. I've heard some men report panic attacks and anxiety or crushing depression. And they'll go to their doctor, and the doctor, if they don't run a testosterone panel, they'll put them on antidepressants. Not knowing that, hey, well, all you had to do was back off the sugar and start exercising again, lifting weights and eating better foods and supporting hormonal health and lowering your cortisol, and you might see a turn. Maybe do that first, for the first few months before you jump into something extreme like, an antidepressant, which you might need, but do these things first.
Well, it's like somebody might get prescribed an antidepressant and assign their depression and anxiety to something being wrong with them biologically or fundamentally genetically versus it being about their diet, And I think that's a really slippery slope, because I think antidepressants have their own host of other side effects that cause negative things. And if somebody goes on those antidepressants and they don't feel any different, they're still eating badly and doing not exercising, it could feel hopeless. Like, oh, this didn't fix me, so what can, And I guess it's like so much of it, I think, just starts with taking care of yourself. There was some celebrity, it might have been Jim Carrey or something, talking about how it's saying that there is real anxiety and depression, but if you're not eating well and not exercising, you're not even giving yourself a chance to be happy.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I guess it goes back to the basics of things. It's like, it just starts with like, just go on a walk. Like it's okay to do things simply, or to do things at like a slow pace. Like,
Walking does so much.
yeah,
Like if you just get up in the morning, even if on those mornings where you just don't feel like it, some people just wake up with this every single day. Like every day they'll wake up and it just feels doom and gloom. But they might find when they start their day, they make their bed, they get into their routine, and it's a predictable routine every day. By the afternoon, they feel good. They may wake up with that the same thing every day, right? Like they call it, what is it, dyspnea or something like that. But most of the time when somebody is struggling with that anxiety, depression, from what I understand, it's connected to like a trauma that they don't even know that they're aware about. And outside of that, it might not have anything to do with any trauma, any diet, nothing. You could, like I said, you could just have major depressive disorder or have, what do they call it, bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. And those things have nothing to do with what you're eating or trauma, other than, it's biology, right? But for a lot of us, a lot of people have grown up, especially in today's society, a lot of that is attached to, the root of trauma. People misunderstand what that word means. They're like, oh, well, isn't trauma like if you were in a major accident, or if you you were in the Vietnam War and you saw somebody's head get blown off? Yeah, but not necessarily. A lot of times trauma, the root of trauma is at the base of what they call the amygdala in the brain, right? The amygdala is that area that senses danger. And it always has this, it always wants to feel safe. If it doesn't feel safe, if it feels threat, that's what trauma is, right? And sometimes a car accident will do that, and people get stuck in trauma, and it takes a while to resolve it. And some people get complex traumas and stuff. But just living in a stressful environment can create trauma, right?
just being a person.
Just being a person is traumatic, right? Just the whole political thing going on right now.
Yeah, AI,
And AI, that creates a sense of not feeling safe. Like if you don't feel safe in your body, it's not what we call PTSD. Like that's a whole different category in the DSM-5, I think. But trauma, like if you're, especially if you got into a major fight about it, and you don't feel safe and it makes you kind of shake and stuff, that kind of stuff needs to be resolved from the body. And no pill, maybe temporarily you might take a pill to kind of help it, but no pill in the long run is going to resolve that, other than trying to figure out a way to feel safe again, and calm and grounded.
Well, and I think no matter what your situation is, what you have to do doesn't change. Like if if somebody's mentally predisposed to anxiety and depression, going on a walk and being in the sun and eating well is still the thing you have to do, even if you're on either end, And I think that, again, it's that desire for the magic solution, that prevents people from growing sometimes, or at least trying to get out of those really rough situations or mental states, And I think it's deeply related to learning how to draw and paint, honestly. Like if somebody is looking for the magic solution to doing anything versus just doing the thing, they're going to constantly be looking to someone else for the validation or for the approval to move on, or at least to do it,
Yeah, I kind of really feel like my art becomes a big catalyst in my mental health as well too, because we are all prone to stress, a lot of stress. And especially as we age and as I've gotten older, I can feel, less resilience to stress, which means I can feel stress more. So, art becomes that catalyst, thank goodness, and thank God I have that. And then the plein-air painting aspects of it, man, it's just so healing to get out.
It puts you outside.
The minute I get out, even if I don't want to, there's days that I'm like, I have to teach this workshop. I've got to go out, and I don't feel like it. And when I'm done, man, I feel I'm so glad that I did it, even though I didn't want to do it. Yeah. Or like I'm teaching a workshop and I'm just not feeling into it to do this workshop as much as I love to teach. I'm like feeling off, right? A little off, and I have low energy, or not necessarily moody, but just I don't have the energy to do it. And then I'll go and I'll do it and I'll push through it. And when I get to the other side, I'm like, mentally, physically, I feel better because I did it, because I went out and I actually engaged and made myself do it as opposed to not doing it, right? Like, and so it teaches you something about, hey, if you get to a place in your life where you're feeling like, unless you feel like you're horribly sick, okay, but not that. If you're at a point where you're like, well, you're challenging whether or not you should do it because you're on the cusp, chances are you're going to feel better if you push yourself to get out and do something and engage with people, do what it is you do and what you do best, right? It's very healing and calming and soothing to do that. And that just the act of being outdoors and being in the sun, even if like recently I did a workshop and we were out there in Oregon. I was with a group of ladies and we were like anywhere from like 60 to 80 years old. And we were all, for some reason, freak weather in Oregon, in Corvallis. We weren't thinking we were going to hit these temperatures. They were thinking, oh yeah, when you get here, it'll probably rain. It was like 90 to 100 degrees.
Oh geez, getting blasted.
It was a 3-day workshop and we were all out there. We had our spray bottles and everybody's getting heat stroked and everything. But we enjoyed ourselves, we enjoyed ourselves. We had a good time. By the time I was finished and I flew back home, I was like, oh, it was so good to do it.
Yeah.
It's so good to get out and do what I know I do.
Well, I think it's almost like having a version of faith, because there's a quicker way to getting dopamine, which is just eating Oreos. If you just eat Oreos, that's a much faster way to feeling that feeling of just feeling good, But it takes something deeper or like a little bit more to push you beyond that desire to go and just get that quick dopamine hit, and it takes facing fear. Like as someone struggling with public speaking or even just going out of their house, like just like going on a little walk will eventually maybe help them start confronting those fears or those anxieties, doing something in some small way eventually can lead to things that are completely unexpected. And like that ability to push past and have that faith that if you just go outside and do your thing and connect with other people, that takes just like a deep, profound optimism that I think is sort of missing if someone is constantly looking at the news and constantly looking at like how doom and gloom everything is. Personally, I've been trying to stay out of the whole AI conversation because no matter what happens from an AI perspective, I think what I have to do remains the same, which is just like keep recording these podcasts and keep trying to make stuff and make art and all that. Like no matter what, even if the world is ending tomorrow and a nuclear bomb is going to drop over there, it's like, well, in a week, what do I do? What do I do for that week until the end of the world? It's like just sit in bed, eat Oreos. It's like, probably not, and I don't know. It's like that, I guess faith or optimism that what you're doing is for some deeper reason other than just like the glory of it or just the money of it, and again, it's odd talking with so many people about this stuff because everyone says very similar things. It's like, just like focus on your health, focus on I suspect if you were to give somebody advice on becoming a better painter, you might say like, make sure you're healthy first or something. It's not just about doing composition and value studies. There's like other things that somebody has to figure out before they're even like ready, or I don't want to say ready, but just like before they're even capable of tackling something as difficulty as
so it kind of lines up with what I had noticed from, I forget was it Gran Turismo? Was that the movie? It might have been the name of that movie, but there was a movie about a kid who practiced on video games and he became a race car driver, right? Yeah. I think it's Gran Turismo. But anyway, and watching that movie, my son and I went to watch it. My son was like, why, if they're just sitting in a car and driving and using a steering wheel, why do they have to be in peak physical health? Like they're on treadmills running really hard and they're lifting weights. Why do they have to be that fit to drive a car? All you're doing is sitting. I was like, it coincides with everything, right? Even with me as an artist, even if I'm just standing up and painting, I need to be at my my peak performance to be able to do everything mentally and physically. If I want to be able to do this in the long run and do great, mentally and physically, I have to be well enough to do it. I have to travel. So physically, I got to be able to travel. When I do workshops, I'm going to be on my feet all day, right? So I don't want to be too heavy, and I want to make sure that I stay light enough and being able to do that and have resilience. As I get older, I want to make sure that my health in my younger years pays off in my later years. So I'm still doing this way up until the later part of my life. But I was just telling my son, these guys, these car drivers, it's more than me, right? I'm like, they're having to, like, there's a lot more physical stuff that goes into the G forces that these guys are sustaining while they're taking turns. So they got to be strong and very resilient, because they're sitting in cars for hours and hours doing this stuff. I go, so it takes a lot more on your body than you think. But other than that, I said, I'm not a race car driver, but I have to make sure that my performance mentally feeds into my physical part of my performance. I got to be like, if I don't get a good night's sleep, my paintings suffer for that.
Yeah.
I notice that they don't look as good if I don't sleep well. If I get a really great night's sleep and I'm refreshed, I work better, everything's better, right? Yeah. Obviously all things better. I talk better, all of that. Like today I'm a little bit, I stutter a little bit today because I noticed I didn't sleep well last night. Right?
I didn't too. Yeah.
Yeah. Like my sleep wasn't as good. That's why I even asked you today. It's like, I lost my train of thought. I didn't sleep well last night. Because I was up super late. My son went to I don't want to blame it on him, but he went to the weekend concert.
That's cool. That's fun.
And like, he didn't get home until like probably 3 a.m. So I was super, like, when you're worried, even though I was laying down, I just kept like waking up, and then I would text him and, where are you? And, but yeah, if you don't sleep good, you're just a little bit off. Your performance is going to be off. And so, if I'm going to be painting really good paintings, if I'm going to be teaching, I got to be at my prime. I've got to be well rested. I've got to be well nourished. And if I slack, I'm going to pay for it. And I will, like you were saying, if you slack off your diet, if I slack off with my diet, especially now, I could do it when I was younger. But at my age now, if I slack off with my diet, man, it really shows. It'll really add up, and my performance will struggle. My teaching, I'll start to kind of struggle, and I'll have to work harder. Yeah. And it won't be as natural.
Well, stress is going to happen in everybody's lives, but there is a fair amount of stress that people can have control over. It's like people have control over their diet and what they eat, and that does feed into how well they're able to study and memorize something and retain that information for the context of doing a painting or writing a song or anything. And I think if somebody is like struggling, even just like waking up in the morning and like they're eating badly and stuff, it's like, I would guarantee that if they were to, instead of like paying $200,000 to go to ArtCenter, if they were to just clean up their diet, that would have a much more profound effect on how much money they made in 5 years than any amount of education or any amount of, preparation that they could do in the moment, Yeah. Again, for me, it's like, I spent a lot of time around a lot of famous teachers in my early 20s, and it didn't motivate me to draw or paint more. It was like going and taking care of myself, doing the walks, listening to audiobooks, trying to eat better. That was the thing that made me want to create stuff way more than any amount of, instruction or professional advice ever could. And I think it's like, I don't know. It's almost like so simple. It's too obvious, I guess the way I've been trying to think of things is like just trying to treat myself as human as I possibly can be, like being realistic, to be like, well, I am made of flesh and blood. And if I do eat badly, in the same way that anyone would eat badly, it would limit their performance. There are definitely weak moments where maybe like I'm out with my girlfriend and we get a lava cake or something for dessert.
I've got to live.
Yeah, you see, you got to live.
You got to live sometimes. Yeah.
And I guess
you got to earn those moments, though.
Definitely, yeah. Well, and I guess going back to what you were saying about like when you're really in a painting, when you're really trying to focus on that stuff, the dishes pile up. You eat worse. You do all these different things, and you have to earn that ability to even do the work. And I guess it goes back
even further to like the sustainability thing, like I think everything kind of has to be in balance properly. Otherwise, none of it works, you know? Like if you're only being the painter, then the bills pile up and the health piles up and all these different relationships pile up. But if you're only doing the relationships, then there's still that creative energy that has to come out in some way, you know? I guess. Yeah.
I think that's where the ebb and flow comes in, you know, because no matter what, you're going to have to try to figure out how to balance that. You know, it's going to happen, and it's part of maturity, I guess.
Yeah.
And trial and error, and that's life, right? Life is about trial and error and figuring it out. And there's no way we can know it. Like, but as a parent, you think you could teach your kid how to prep for all that stuff. You can't, you know. My experience so far, I try to prep my kid, be like, son, all of these things are going to happen to you. And it's just, you know what? He has to experience it on his own.
Yeah.
A lot of things I can try to prep, you know, and let him know. But a lot of things he's just going to have it happen. But one of the biggest things I've told him is just like, you know what? If anything, though, if I can give you any advice, invest in some kind of real estate.
Yeah, yeah,
Real estate.
Totally. Yeah, right.
Real estate. That's something I really wish I knew when I was a lot younger, is get as much real estate as you could probably get your hands on.
S&P 500, real estate, you know, all that stuff. Yeah.
Get yourself invested. That way, when you're at my age, you're not really like, because there's a difference between the kind of like artwork I have to make for money versus the artwork I can do for myself. Right.
Yeah.
And when money gets involved, it can get to be a little slippery slope. I'm pretty good with it. You know, I'm pretty good about how, you know, money drives things. But let's say, for example, if I'm in the plein-air world, or it's about galleries, right? There's a tendency, if survival gets in the way and you're like, what sells, right? It tends to get into your head, a bit. In the gallery, if you're putting work in there, and let's say, for example, your work isn't selling right away, there's a tendency to try to like analyze it and be like, okay, well, maybe it needs to look more like those guys, their paintings. Or you ask the gallery, what's been selling here?
Yeah.
It's the wrong question to be asking. You know, like, you don't want to cater to what the world wants. Like, they're going to want you, or they're not going to want you. It is, yeah. Either there is or it isn't. You need to be really honest with your work, right? And that will always sell. It always sells. Like, honesty always sells.
Totally.
In artwork.
Yeah.
You see, like, somebody who just puts their heart and soul into their painting, people want it. You know, that stuff always goes.
I think honesty sells in everything, like even real estate. Like, if you make a space that no one wants to live in, even if it's like correct, no one will want to live there. Right. You know, it's like it's the same thing with music, and you know, like, I guess any creative thing at all.
Well, maybe I'm wrong. I've looked at a lot of. I've talked to some friends about like swap meet art, and there's a lot of people doing like this kitsch. Well, kitsch is all kind of subjective, right? Yeah. But like in my opinion of what kitsch would be, right? Like, you know, cringy artwork that people are selling. To me, I don't see it as honest, because I kind of feel like all they're doing is like trying to see what sells at a swap meet. Yeah. What do people like? What it looks. It's basically furniture. Call it furniture art, right? Yeah. It's basically furniture on the wall, is what it is. And like coyotes howling, silhouette howling with a moon above their head type stuff.
Yeah. Thomas Kincaid type. Yeah.
The things that go for so much money. Like, here I'm struggling to do my honest plein-air painting, and that's fine. I'll dial in that. I am fine with dying on that hill, right? Like, of honesty. I just do what I do. And if it doesn't make as much money as the guy painting tuna can labels on a wall, and his stuff is selling for millions, so be it. Right. That's kitsch, right? Whatever it is, however that works and why it works and what sells, whatever, it all comes down to my soul in the end. It's like, you know, like you said, would you be okay dying with $1 million without the stress and living a good life, and you didn't have the multi-million-dollar home? Or do you want all the money from that painting you sold of a tuna can, deep down in your heart knowing it wasn't your best work?
And well, I think it's complicated because it's different for different people. You know, it's like there's art that's created, and I'm like, that is a waste of time. You know, from my perspective, and for other people, it's
True.
It is
True.
It is exactly what
the tuna can could have been everything to them.
Well, it might have changed somebody's soul. And I mean, I've talked about people who do like Rule 34 porn art online, and from my perspective, that's like the lowest form of art in some ways. You know. But I mean, I shouldn't say that exactly, but it's like, but to other people, that is the most meaningful thing. They would rather be doing that than anything in the world. And it's all complicated because it is all just so subjective. And the hard part about it is like making something that's like unique to you, like the thing that is most sustainable that you care about the most. And like for me, there's a way of presenting this podcast to be as obnoxious and clickbaity as possible, to be like, ex-DreamWorks artist spills the beans on whatever, you know, but it's like, maybe that's not what the direction that I want to go in exactly. But from my own experiments on YouTube, you know, playing around with presentation, there is a preference for that kind of stuff. You know, it's like when I am more bombastic, when I am more just like, you know, obnoxious in the way that I present my podcasts, I can see like a pretty marked improvement in the content, you know. Like my most viewed podcast right now is with Peter Hahn, and it has like 250,000 views or something. And
wow.
The title of it is like how to become a pro artist without going to art school. And the thumbnail text is art school doesn't work. And it's like you know, it is kind of an obnoxious thumbnail, but it's like, it creates a question or a conversation with the viewer in a way that just having like podcast number or whatever Peter Hahn wouldn't. It's just like an objective presentation of information, whereas the thing with presenting in that way is like, again, it's like people will click on that just to hear the opinion, or just to like,
yeah,
you know, just to be like there's a story there, you know. And again, I think it's always complicated because I wish I could just release a podcast and have it just be like number whatever than the guest. But moving forward, just like the way things have to be presented, just so I can like eventually make this a business, I have to like play a little bit to whatever, I have to compromise on whatever the thing is, just to like maybe turn this into money, to like maybe buy a house, to be able to invest in the stocks, to have that security, to reduce that cortisol and to reduce that stress, you know. But it takes like me selling a little bit of what I'd want this thing, if I didn't have to worry about money, to even get there. You know, it's sort of like a catch-22 or like a fundamental little compromise on the whole thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like the one thing I tell my son is, you don't really want to be worrying about money when you're my age, right? Because you don't want to be dealing with stress at my age, because it's harder to deal with stress at my age. You know, you feel it more. At a much younger age, when you're very resilient, that's where you want the stress, right? I mean, not too much, right? You want to be careful. You don't want to set yourself up for something. But when you have the resilience to deal with all of that stuff, do it then. Do it at, do it at your age now, like the college, the studying, the hard job, the long hours, all that stuff. The investments, make all that, like you said, create the foundation for that place where it doesn't have to be when you're 60. Like, you can create a foundation now, so by the time you're 30 or 40, you're set.
Yeah.
That way you're like, well, yeah, I'm at 30 and 40 and I can continue to now do whatever it is I want to do, right? Without having that insane stress, because life, you need to have some stress, right? Stress is there. You got to have it. You got to have a measurable amount of stress and a measurable amount of anxiety to be able to know what the opposite feels like, right? But we don't want extremes on either end. You don't want to be too extremely happy, dopamine artificially high, or too extremely sad, low either. But get yourself set now. Get that, like I said, get the real estate. Work hard now. I tell them, work hard now. Don't be afraid of working hard now, so you don't have to work insanely hard later. Because if you find that at 50, you're worried about these things and you're having to work really hard at 50, that's a bad place to be.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with working hard at 50. But you don't want to be hopelessly stressed at 50.
Yeah. Like everything will, like, it's like there's a fire and your life is on the line, you know, and all this stuff.
Exactly. Right. But at the same time, listening to a woman I follow on TikTok, I forget what her name was, but she, her whole specialty is training, working with people with trauma. And she was just kind of talking about, the one trend she says she's been grateful enough to work with and help so many people who've struggled with trauma throughout their life. And she goes, but no matter who they were, she goes, there were people who've had, the IRS at their door, wanting, $1 million that they owe. There are people who've lost their children. There, if you think about the most traumatic things and stressful things, these people are okay.
Right.
These people are okay. They're okay. And it's just kind of telling yourself that no matter what life gives you, you need to be able to know that the body and the mind are pretty damn resilient.
Super
You'd be
resilient.
surprised. You'd be surprised what it is, just what your body and your mind could actually adapt to if it has to. Right?
Totally.
Needed.
Everybody, right?
It's amazing it's amazing what we could do. We can do a lot more than we could think. And when you know that about the body and the brain, like you think about the work you're creating, like, wow, what's right around the corner if I really figure out a way to unlock my full potential.
Definitely. I mean, a book that had a big impact on me when I was younger was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. If you it's a guy, he's a clinical psychologist. He was Jewish during the Holocaust, and he was in a concentration camp. And he talks about how he was able to find meaning after his wife had been, sent to the gas chambers, and he was seeing people around him die, and he was constantly under the threat of dying himself. And him talking about how his focus on the people around him who lost hope, who lost the ability to be optimistic, ended up, they were the ones that died from hunger or starvation or disease, whereas he was able to maintain a level of hope and optimism in spite of the circumstances that let him get through this incredibly difficult time. And I don't want to undersell or devalue the Holocaust by bringing this up at all, but it's I think that so much of suffering happens in the brain. Again, going back to that, you can make a hell of heaven and a heaven of hell. I guarantee that there are times in my life when I am not feeling the greatest, when on paper I should be the happiest person in the world relative to how other people are living in the world right now. There are people that would kill to be in the exact position that we're in, just being able to sit on a Thursday afternoon and record a podcast for 3 hours. That is an immense blessing.
A luxury.
Yeah. Most people in the world make $6,000 a year or something. When you just take in not just America, just the global population, people are prone to disease and famine and war.
We live in such a bubble.
Exactly. Yeah, right. It's we can look at being able to go and work a corporate job as the worst case scenario, which is definitely a privilege and definitely a thing to be thankful for, but it's also not to discount the ability and our ability to just pursue being ourselves. Yeah. But I guess it's all to say that if someone is able to just find and maintain that meaning and optimism, if they could just continually just keep going on walks, just keep doing the paintings, just keep trying to push themselves further and further, eventually that leads to success, but that, I don't know. I think it's that it's like that saying, comparison is the thief of joy. When you start to compare yourself to other people, or when you start to become entitled to what you want versus what you think, what you want versus what you need, that's when things start to get really tricky, at least from my perspective,
Yeah. And it's in these times right now that we're moving forward, there is, there is that sense in having a lot of uncertainty in the art community for a lot of the entertainment artists, especially who are, you know, trying to decide, you know, there's a sense of hesitation right now, right? There's a hesitation of do I invest in all of this money in this in moving in this direction in the entertainment field with what's going on, not just with AI, but like, you know, with movies, are they going to try to figure out ways to make them cheaper, or what does that look like? Again, in lieu of what that one trauma coach was talking about with these people who have struggled with some of the most toughest challenges in their life, they're all okay. And in the sense for artists trying to get into this industry, if this is what you love to do, you'll be okay. You know,
Totally.
You're going to be totally all right. If you are honest and pure and you work hard, don't worry about it. Like, don't worry about, oh God, is there going to be a job there? There will be a job for you if you are talented, right?
Yeah.
If you put your heart and soul into your work. And when I say educate, whatever it is you use for education, right? You know, to train yourself, or you go to school to be training, whatever it is you got to do to become really good at what you do, you'll be okay in this industry. You may need to be flexible, you know, more than anything, more than the way we used to be in the past. But as long as you're flexible and you kind of keep up with where the industry is headed, you'll be fine. In fact, I'm more excited these days with what's right around the corner, because, you know, yeah, there's still a lot of movies being made for the big screen, but then there's also so much stuff that's just going to be made for home entertainment, phone entertainment. I mean, just
YouTube.
YouTube. Yeah. People haven't lost the urgency to want to be entertained. If anything, they need it more now, right? They need more. They want more entertainment. They want it more and more and more. And so that creativity, it hasn't gone anywhere. In fact, it's just growing. We need it. So everybody will be fine.
Like Proco, as a business, has had his best year every year for the past couple of years. And it's like in spite of AI, you know, in spite of, like, you know, you would think that once you can make an image instantly using AI, then people would not want to learn how to draw. But then there's been like a huge spike or resurgence in people wanting to do this stuff. And, you know, maybe the markets of like animation or entertainment are dwindling in their own ways, but I think there's always some other avenue for trying to make the thing that someone loves doing monetizable, or at least sustainable. And I think the only way, again, to keep doing it is just to, again, maintain that optimism, just to, you know, keep on doing the paintings and I guess just never stop.
Optimism and passion. Yeah. I don't even worry about it. The rest will follow, you know, the job will follow right after that. It'll always be there. It will always be opportunity for those who ask for it and who want it and go to get it. It'll be there for sure.
Cool. So how should people follow you online?
They could find me on my Instagram handles at Squatch Gouache, or they can go to my my website, www.mikehernandezart.com. For now, those are the only two places I think I kind of have, or my Facebook page. But like I said, I don't really use Facebook, so it's mostly Instagram.
Cool. Well, thanks again, man. Yeah, cool.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
Cool. It was fun.